Hello Moana Exiles, welcome to a very special Path of Exile 2 video. I am here with Dreamcore and Sylver XYZ here on the 5th episode of the Still Sane podcast to discuss everything Path of Exile 2 related. It's been a bit since we've been able to get together, and since the last time we've learned about the early access release date, we've learned a ton about the campaign, skill gems, and myriad other changes to do with PoE 2. But as we were talking about in the pre-show just a little bit, Sylver said, we actually kind of know less than ever about PoE 2. It feels like we know less than ever about the game, which is a wild state to be in because we're 55 days away from the game actually launching. So we have a firm date. GGG probably isn't gonna delay it. I mean, what do you guys think? Is there a chance of a delay at all?
No, absolutely not.
Zero. 0% chance.
All right, then the first thing I want to bring up to you guys, I think we're all working people here. You know, none of us are doing this full time. You guys booking PTO? Dreamcore, you got PTO planned?
I'm definitely gonna make time for it. Yeah, 100%.
Sylver?
Try to get some time to play it.
Yeah, what does that mean though, right? Like, give us numbers. Come on, what are we talking? A week?
Oh.
Are we talking a day?
I mean, it's the thing. I don't know. It's hard to say how quickly you'll kind of acclimatize yourself to the campaign in Path of Exile 2, because it's like it might be something that you just over sort of 1, 2, 3 acts, you kind of get used to what's going on, how the flow of the game is, and then it's like smooth sailing from there. Or it might just be that you don't. You know, you never really get a grip to the campaign until you've gone through like 5, 10 times. Who knows? I don't really know. It depends really how many of those like small unique interactions they make that you never see. You're like, oh, I didn't see that the last time. And then you come across a new one. You're like, I haven't seen that. I've done like 5 playthroughs, 6 playthroughs, right? So
Yeah, and we like, it's hard to remember what it's like to play PoE for the first time. I don't know about you, but like, I absolutely can't. I looked at my account the other day, and I made my account January 2013, and I was like,
you're a vet,
wow.
dude. Yeah, you're a vet.
Yeah, like I couldn't believe
started
it.
at a similar time.
Right, but even for you guys, I imagine it's like hard to imagine what playing the game is for the first time. It's crazy. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think I've booked like basically like a week and a half, maybe push it to 2 weeks. And I think it's going to take me that long just to go like, just to know what's going on, to be honest. I think there's going to be new players coming into the game that are going to have an easier time with some things, right? Like damage conversion. Like, we're so stuck in this idea of like chain of damage conversion, you know, like obviously you did a video about it recently, Dream, and I think things like that might be actually harder for us to get our heads around than like a new player who's got, you know, switched on, who just thinks, oh yeah, this is, you know, they're learning it for the first time. So yeah, I'm going for like a week and a half. I need a week and a half just to get through Act 3, I think, and then.
That's actually a great point. Having like older players play this game and then kind of switch between the two, especially during early access when, you know, you might kind of exhaust the content, there's still things being added in and stuff like that, and you go back to Path of Exile 1, it's going to be a bit jarring. I actually touched on that a little bit in a couple of those videos. I think it will be jarring going between the two games. Yeah. Because it's just going to be like, you know things. You have like muscle memory of how things work, and then you go into Path of Exile 2, and that's not how they work anymore, you know?
Yeah,
so,
it's going to be crazy.
It'll be a bit weird, yeah.
Even something as jarring as movement, you know? WASD to point and click. Like, can you imagine being able to swap between all these different methods and had them playable from the ground up, right? Because they've rebuilt this game with WASD in mind. Like, I chatted with a dev, didn't end up panning out into a full interview or anything, but essentially said something we knew. They had to redo everything for WASD. Animations, abilities, every area, the layout, all that stuff, ground up. They didn't say, oh, well, you know, this feels good, so we're just going to drop it in the game, and if it works out, it works out. They redid everything, and it's not going to be in PoE 1. And I don't think it will ever be in PoE 1, but that's going to be a jarring thing, swapping between the two.
Definitely at first. And I think then this is kind of another topic, so I won't get too into it, but like how we experience the league mechanics and things, right? Like even if you just one for one ported the league mechanics, like doing a ritual with dual stick movement or WSD, however you're going to play it, is going to be very, very different, right? It's not like this run into an empty space, press a button and blow everything up, do the same thing again. It's like this weaving and stuff. So yeah, even our experience of content, even if it didn't change very much, is going to be wildly different. But yeah, what about you, Trey? How long you got off?
I've got Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, but you know, as a dad, usually weekends are pretty booked already. I also have Saturday and Sunday plans for my two lovely children, so I get to blast 5 days. I'm very excited. So
yeah, that's crazy.
Oh, it's
for a dad. That's big. That's big numbers, right?
Hey, yeah. So shout out to Grandma. Shout out to my wife as well. Shout out to both grandmas actually, because they're both gonna help out. But it's gonna be a fun time. So we're all gonna be playing on launch. Then that's great. I'm curious. A few things about the launch, since we're talking about it. Obviously, November 15th. It's a Friday for most of the Path of Exile Western audience, right? Day one servers. What's the over/under? They gonna crash? They gonna be fine? What's going on?
Has there been a major game release where there's not been server issues? In like, I don't know. I haven't played. I don't play that many games, to be fair. I'm a PoE nerd, so like, but I don't know many games that launch with the numbers that we're depending on how we get into the beta. If they go, oh, it's like $10, and they let loads of people in, and it turns out to be huge numbers, I think there's going to be some kind of server issues, right? Like even if it's just queue problems, or maybe hopefully we don't get like an error 37 like last Epoch situation or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
How many people do you think are going to be in there on day one?
It's another huge thing, guys.
I mean, so I think it obviously it does depend on how they're doing the access. Personally, I don't think there's going to be any requirements for access. This might be a bit of a weird take for you guys. Some people will think that it's going to be like paid. I mean, obviously they've said that it might be similar to how they've done things in the past, which I believe was like a paid thing. It was like a, you know, you had a certain spend amount or whatever, and then you were invited in. But I actually think it's going to be completely open.
Wow.
You're just in there on day one. That's what. So the reason why I think it's going to be like that is because they've marketed it in a way that they've basically just. I don't think they would give a date like that and have it completely open like this kind of marketing where they're definitely targeting that sort of more casual player base in the console market and things like that. And there's just a date. They've just given a date and no other information at all. So I just think here's the date, you know, turn up on that day and you can play basically. That's what I think they're trying to go with it.
Want to hear a super hot take from me? I think they still don't know. And that's why we don't know. I think that they are.
Possibly. They're running it a bit late though, aren't they, dude? If they still don't know.
Right. Well, if they knew, okay? If they knew back then when they released the early access teaser, which is now their most viewed YouTube video of all time. It was on the Gamescom floor, right? There were millions of people watching all these different trailers and announcements. That final line wouldn't have said, play on November 15th. It would say, play free for everyone on November 15th. Like, it would be big, bolded. You see that in every other game that is like free to play, right? It's not just play it, it's play free. Even with like Path of Exile in its earliest days, it was always, yep, you can play for free on this day, right? With all their trailers in Path of Exile 1, it's always play free. That language. I think they're debating it because it's a huge amount of money they're looking at, right? But there's also a ton of goodwill that they're going to get from all these different players if they're letting everybody into the game. So I think it's something they're wrestling internally with. And as soon as they make that decision, I think that's when we find out. And you're right. You know, we're like 8 weeks out. Wow, 8 weeks. That sounds less than 55 days for some reason, you know? I don't know why.
So my only 2 cents, I hope you're right, Dream, because I think it would be good for the game's like audience size and marketing, like long term. I think just let everyone play, and also you're going to get more varied feedback because you're not just going to get diehard people that are willing to spend $20 on it or whatever. So I think that's a good thing. But then, and I agree with you, Try, that like, yeah, I don't think they probably don't know. And I think the contention isn't necessarily goodwill. The only two cents that like I would have is that I think it's more about the health of the marketing strategy for the game. Because if you keep it kind of exclusive, you get a chance to like iron out a few things. Don't let all those players that are like going to be, that aren't already sold. Like, the game could be terrible when it launches, and us three, and most of the people watching this would still be like, yeah, but it's GGG, they'll fix it, right? Whereas, like, we're so sold on the thing. Whereas, like, I think if you bar those kind of, like, more casual or, like, newer audience to the game, I think they should be called new audience. I won't use the word casual anymore. Then you allow the game to like get a little bit of polish, a little bit of flex before they experience it, and then hopefully don't bounce. So that would be my thinking. I agree with you. I don't think they know, but I think that's what they're going to be wrestling with.
I think that's a solid take.
So let's say that it's completely open, right? There's no paid thing. How many players?
200,000 to 400,000, I think, on first weekend.
No way.
I think that's a mega low ball.
That's a low ball, dude. Yeah, Sylver, get out of here, dude.
I think they'll break 1 million if it's completely open.
Okay, well, I'm trying to be conservative, but like that's
because the thing is like right now I think we had the player peak for Path of Exile 1, which I believe doesn't include. Does it include the standalone client? Was it 370,000?
Yeah. That includes standalone. I don't know if it includes consoles though.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's definitely standalone, but they never explicitly say it includes consoles. Maybe it does, and it's what, 350,000?
Something like that, yeah.
Well, it's got to be at least that then. Yeah, no, I'm way off.
So, but I think that, if it is completely open, there's going to be so many people just logging in and trying it because of how good the traders and things look. Even people that haven't played ARPGs, they've got that they're just installing it and trying it.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I've got many friends in real life. They will not touch Path of Exile 1. They're like, day one Path of Exile 2, dude. If I can get in, I'm playing that game. I feel like there's,
it's definitely a very specific person that plays Path of Exile 1 for sure. I think you've either like played it before or you're that type of person that's inclined to play it. But I think Path of Exile 2 is definitely feeling a little bit more open in terms of its targeting.
Yeah.
So I do expect a wider variety of players to just log in at least and try it.
I'm thinking I'm gonna lowball just a little bit. Well, no, on Steam, I bet there will be like 600,000 people on Steam. And then between everything else, I think that it'll break maybe 900,000. That's my guess. If they get public with the numbers, because obviously they're not gonna. Well, actually, I bet they'll showcase regardless. If they're breaking like, their old records with PoE 1, I bet they'll flaunt that and say like, oh yeah, 800,000 players on the first weekend. I think that's what it'll be. And I know that we're a little bit, skeptical about new game launches. A lot of the new game launches that have server issues, they're like companies that have launched games in the past, but then they forget how to launch or create a game, right? So we can, like Last Epoch was a first time launch, get that. But like Blizzard and like Diablo 4, they had slight server issues. They've launched a lot of games in the past. Right, but they seem to forget how to do things sometimes. I think grinding your games, because they're launching new stuff every 3 to 4 months, I think it'll be pretty darn steady. And I think they know that it's going to be a hit. Or at least that it's going to have a lot of players that first weekend.
I always just think, I agree with you, because it's such a good point, right? Like they're essentially launching a new game every 3 to 4 months, right? So like, and they're testing, this is rigorous, but I just think you don't know what you don't know. Like, I guess what it is, this is like a bit of a cope for me, because I'm like, I want to go into that Friday with my snacks in the Discord with you guys, with everyone, just being super hyped and being like, yes, let's go. And then I would just want to be okay if it says like error. Like, because if I just go in blind,
We'll suffer together, man. It'll be fine.
Yeah. We'll do a still sane. We'll do an emergency
I think
still sane.
some errors and things are kind of to be expected, because it is. You got to remember that it's a early access launch, right?
Mhm.
They have deliberately marketed it as an early access launch. There will be bugs, there will be balance problems, there will likely be server issues, and everyone should go in knowing that they're not playing a full release game.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some issues,
I think the biggest issues are going to be balance issues. I think some players.
I don't really see many server problems because I think they're quite clued in these days with like knowing how to deal with those kind of launches. Like we've had launch after launch where there's like huge player numbers coming in, and there's been really no problems with servers. Like the last really poor. I mean, I do remember in Necropolis, launch was fine, but like a month in, for some reason, the servers were really bad for EU. This was like weeks at a time. The servers were really bad, but it wasn't at launch, And I think the last bad launch. I'm trying to think. Was there a bad launch? Ultimatum was really bad. Yeah.
I think that's the last one.
I don't. Yeah, exactly. I think that. I mean, we're pretty lucky with launches these days. Like I think we take it for granted how good the launches are. There's just so many people flooding in, and there's barely any issues.
Yeah. You're right. I'm wrong.
It's the saying. If,
I want to believe you. I want to believe you.
If everything goes smooth, nobody notices, nobody calls it out. But if everything goes to heck, oh gosh, everything's on fire. Yeah. Everybody's complaining. Yeah. So, yeah,
do you know what?
It'll be pretty
Regardless
smooth.
Of what happens, it'll be fine either way. They'll fix it quick, so it'll be good, right?
It's a Saturday in New Zealand for them. That's something else. Just a shout out to them. They launch it on the best possible time for the bulk of their audience. So we can play it on the weekend or, Friday night. Thank you for not doing a midweek launch. Thank you so much. I know it must suck for GGG because they go in on Saturday. And I bet for this launch, it's not going to be, 6 people in the office just in case there's an issue. I bet they're going to be having a party.
It's going to be all hands on deck.
All hands on deck, literally everybody in. So,
it's like, I think for them, I can only imagine, what's this been like 7 years-ish in the works? It's like, this is going to be a celebrate. This will be like a festival, right? Like, it's going to be like, obviously it'll be work for them as well. And it's a really good point you're making, like respect to them for doing it. But can you imagine the excitement? Can you imagine the excitement in the office? It's going to be wild.
But both times I spoke to Jonathan, I mean, he gave the most wholesome answer to what he's most looking forward to. It's not like, oh yeah, to rake in all that sweet cash, or like the typical like, oh, just to get the game out. We've been working on it's I am going to be in the global chat. I'm going to be in Twitch chats. I'm going to be watching everyone's reactions, seeing what they think of like the unique items and discovering all these things. It's such a wholesome answer. It's like, and it makes sense totally, because if you care about your game that much and you've been putting all this effort into it, and there's all this hidden stuff that people don't know, watching those first reactions. I think back to like the Atlas passive skill tree, because that was the first oh my god moment where they obviously were tuned in, and you probably had 500 different streams open during that reveal. I imagine that moment's going to be happening all throughout PoE 2 for a lot of players, and they're going to be excited to watch it.
For sure. First Lumeris kill.
Yeah.
Okay. You can tell like that they're just gamers.
Mm-hmm.
They just like, I mean, it's the same with Mark now. Obviously, now he's like the lead dev on the game. You just know that he is just a gamer by the way he speaks about things as well. When he's doing like an interview and talking about changes that people bring up, problem points that people bring up, he's pretty responsive to those points because he already knows what's going on there. Like we had the thing with Melee, right? Melee totems are now gone. He got rid of those. He was like, he obviously couldn't think of a way to solve that problem, because I think they would have tried to keep the totems in the game if they could have, because there was like MTX and stuff that they had to refund for those, which was like that's kind of a big deal, right? You're just gonna refund people MTX. They're just like, nope, this is that much of a problem that we're just deleting the skill. And that doesn't really happen unless you're clued into the game that much that you know how much of a problem that is.
Yeah, that is such a good point. It's the same
with like Path of Exile 2. They want to see what we want to see, really. If they were experiencing the game for the first time, they just want to see that they're just excited for us to discover all these things, and it's just it's cool. It's a wholesome thing. I think it's nice.
Okay, assuming we have all 8 classes, you guys, what do you think you want to really discover first? Which one do you want to hop into and play? I know we don't know ascendancy details yet. I'm starting to think more and more we're only going to know like 1 or 2 ascendancies before early access, and then the others we're literally going to discover on the day. So assuming, it's just those 8 we've seen, not a lot of ascendancy details, which archetype or which class do you think you want to start with?
Oh God, do you want to go, Dream?
So I think I would like to start with the warrior, just because it's just kind of my thing. I just enjoy that kind of playstyle, like heavy hitting, slow build up attacks is kind of fun. Building up a pretty tanky character that can just like stay in the middle of things for a while. But with that said, I'd love to see if if the Templar is going to be there. I really want to see what's going on with the Templar, because I think there's a lot of interesting things that they could do with that. I'm really interested to see what they're doing with totems in Path of Exile 2, because they haven't really said anything about totems. We know that there's there's 2 totems, right, that they've shown off so far. One was like
Shockwave.
Shockwave. That one's been in for a while, and then there's the ancestral war chief or something, but we haven't actually seen that one. We don't know what it does yet.
Like a tier 11 gem or something.
I mean, I personally think they're gonna like pull some ideas from how Val Ancestral War Chief worked in Path of Exile before it was deleted, and that thing is gonna just jump around and smash things, right? Because that was like the really cool thing about that gem, was that compared to all the other totems, you plop that down and it just jumps all over the place and smashes everything on your screen. Like, it's just going absolutely crazy, right? So, I'm just interested to see how they go about doing totems and see what the Templar has.
Super curious. Sylver, enough time bot for you?
You know what? This is a really hard one because I am obviously super deep into the Ascendancy, thinking about that stuff. Right. I feel like the Ascendancy is the real class, right? Like, but I know the question is, okay, you don't know the Ascendancies, right? So like, just based on the raw theme. But then the way I look at that is kind of like, well, then you're not really picking a class, you're picking a position on the tree.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of it, right? Yeah, it's like really you're just picking like, am I closer to strength nodes, like to stun nodes or minion nodes, or like, evasion nodes? Like that's really, you're not really picking a class. So with that caveat stated, like, but if I was just going off pure theme and vibe, I think I've always been like a rogue enjoyer. I've always enjoyed like rogue classes and stuff like that. So I'm really interested to see what they do with the Shadow, because I suspect there might be some kind of like stealth and like actual intricate kind of like ambush. I think basically like the ambush gem combined with like smoke mine or something is going to be like that kind of class kit for like a Shadow. I think there's going to be a lot of in out, bit of stealth, bit of this, triggering different effects. So I think that could be a really interesting gameplay thing if they can figure that out and make it work within a PoE context. So I'm really curious to see that. That's my thing. Yeah.
All right. I'm not even gonna linger on mine. The druid. I mean, it's
obviously
far enough. I just want to turn into the animals or the bear. So I don't have to be a druid. I'll do whatever. I'll be a warrior. But I feel like, especially if the warrior has an ascendancy, like that leaked one, the Earthshaker, which likely deals with slams a lot, I bet we're going to be seeing some bear warrior Earthshakers out there and stuff. Just thinking that there's all these gems, there's probably going to be 300 plus by the time early access releases, with the way that they've gone with the skill gems. And that's the next topic, you guys. We're going to talk about gems. The way that they're going to function with all these different ascendancies is just going to be like, people are saying, oh yeah, Path of Exile 2 is going to be less complex than PoE 1. Are we sure about that? Are we really sure that it's going to be less complex? I think I had this discussion and somebody educated me. I think the floor is going to be higher. No, the floor is going to be lower. It's going to be easier for people to get into the game, but the ceiling is also going to be higher at the end of the day. for the depth and complexity. What do you guys think about that, given what we've seen?
Yeah, hard agree with that, because I don't think people are appreciating the complexity added by 2 weapon slots. I just don't think that's been like enough attention has kind of been drawn to that. Like even in a lot of the gameplay demos that we've seen at Gamescom, at the PoE events and things like that, a lot of people it didn't look like many people had access to the passive points by that point, where you could, really change up the passive tree. But 2, you didn't really have an opportunity to like really craft, okay, I'm using this weapon, this amazing, one-handed sword and shield, because you didn't craft that stuff and you didn't get this access to the skills, and there weren't that many skills in the game because they were kind of funneling you down like prototypes that they wanted to show off. So I really agree, because I don't think people are appreciating. We've essentially got 9 6 links. That's without custom, like unique items giving us skills and potentially ascendancies giving us additional abilities. And we have 2 entire weapon slots that can make use of that. So like we've got all this combination of different stuff. So yeah, I agree with you. I think the ceiling is going to be incredibly high. And you look at some of the players like Jung Roan, or like, like different kind of like really high-end build creators and sort of like skill players. I think you're going to see some crazy stuff. Like not drawing an exact comparison, but you see someone who's just playing Street Fighter for fun, and then you see someone that's like got the gamepad and they're like just like 500 comboing someone into a wall. I think there's gonna be like a little bit of that going on with PoE at the top end. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I think generally speaking, from the perspective of complexity in the game, they are removing things that are just not necessary mostly, which is because Path of Exile has a lot of complexity from years of things being like layered on top of each other. And there's just a lot of needless complexity in the game. Like I love the mechanics of the game. Obviously, I know a lot about it, but there are a lot of things that just don't need to be there really. Like it's just not really very necessary. I mean, I remember watching one of the discussions that Jonathan did. I'm trying to remember where this was, but he was talking about Leech. I think it was at ExileCon. He was talking about Leech on the stage, right? They were talking about how they changed Leech in Path of Exile 2, and they were saying how Leech is a really big kind of problem for them, because a problem they've been trying to solve because of how complex it is in Path of Exile 1. And someone in the crowd like shouts out, "Just make it simple, just make it simple." Which I'm sure everybody can kind of like. They understand what that guy's saying, that just make it simple. It should be just a simple mechanic, right? And I think that is basically how they're looking at Path of Exile 2. Is like they're keeping all of the complexity in terms of the build craft and stuff. Like Sylver said, that's what they're doing. The build craft is going to be wild. I agree, it's going to be absolutely wild. But they're just removing needless junk, I would just call it. Like things that just don't really need to be there. They're kind of like aspects of old systems, or things that they thought were good at one point that they now realize are just not really necessary anymore, right?
Right, so the stuff that you have to spend half your video explaining, right, before you can get into what you want to say about the mechanic.
Exactly. I mean, Leech is ridiculous. Like, I haven't done a video on Leech. Like, I haven't bothered, because there's one really good video which sometimes I get people asking me about Leech. I'm like, man, this like maybe I should make this video, But there's just one really good video, and it's like 2 hours long, dude. It's a 2 hour long video of this guy just explaining Leech. It's a great video, and I just link that whenever people ask me about Leech. It's
wild.
They listened to that dude in the crowd. They made it simple. Leech is stupid simple in Path of Exile 2. It's just a number, and monsters gain Leech resistance.
Yeah, Leech resistance is a great design.
There you go.
Very clever,
Super simple,
because it kind of solves that problem from having all of the. I mean, having all those ridiculous stats and kind of understanding them. You just don't need them if you've got this system in place with Leech resistance. So that was a good solve.
It's so unintuitive, I think, is like from players who, because you'll get members of the audience and of the game and stuff that will be like, oh, well, they're dumbing the game down. And I think maybe sometimes it's the wrong like kind of seesaw to look at, like dumb or smart. I think sometimes it's like, how intuitive is this system to play? Because something can be really complex but intuitive, like, and you intuitively discover the thing. Whereas, like you say, when you've got 3 stats that are like leech maximum rate per second, minus, you know, and then you've got like leech total amount recovery, and then you've got, well, life recovery rate affects this. It's like, what? This is the most unintuitive thing you could imagine. So I think like intuitive is definitely something that clearly they're going for. I mean, yeah. Can I ask you guys then? I don't know if you had this on the agenda, Try, and feel free to kick it down the road if it is.
Freeform, it's okay.
One of the changes that I think is a really big defensive change, and like this is right up your alley, Dream, but is wild to me, and I almost think this was the only time where I've gone, is that a bit too simple? Is Jonathan recently saying in an interview that spell defense and attack defense now essentially are the same thing. So monsters don't perform spells or attacks, they just hit you. It's like a hit or a degen, I guess, is basically the only distinction. So there's no such thing as, where in theory, there's no such thing as spell avoidance. There's no such thing as spell suppression. There's just suppression, deflection, block. And to me, I'm like, I don't know until I play it, right? But there's just this thing where I'm like, that feels really big. That feels like a really big change. Like, oh, so we don't have spell block, we just have block. And
it's a huge change. Well, it rolls into the other changes that they've made, though, and it makes a lot of sense because how they're designing the game is that, you have like things that can be blockable are very obviously blockable. Like, it's more realistic. Like, here comes an arrow flying in towards you. You're able to block it. Or this monster's using like a sword attack on you. You're able to block it, right? That would be a projectile and a strike. But then a monster's coming above you with like a giant hammer and it's slamming in an area right on top of you. I mean, realistically, you're not blocking that, right? Because it's hitting behind you, it's smashing the ground. So I think the reason why they made that change is partly because of this change to the way our block works and the way evasion works, right? They're saying like, let's remove that aspect because it's a little bit weird. You're investing into evasion and block or something like that, and it's like, why wouldn't block be something universal that affects? It doesn't matter if it's an arrow coming in, right, or a fireball. Like having spell and attack block just feels a little bit weird from that perspective. I kind of understand it from a balance perspective in Path of Exile 1.
Dude, you're educating me.
They probably look at evasion, right? And it's like, evasion is just so... Imagine being a new player in Path of Exile 1, and you've invested into evasion, and then you guys know about this, right? These skeletons that shoot fireballs that just deal absurd damage, right?
Mm-hmm.
You immediately know if you don't have like spell suppression, you just instantly die to these things. By the way, imagine you're just playing, right? And you've got evasion, and you're like, oh, these guys are firing projectiles. That's fine. I'm just gonna avoid like most of them, right? And you just walk into that pack, and you instantly die. Boom, you're dead. Every single one of those fireballs hit you, and they all deal full damage, and it's insane. So I think from a player perspective, the change is really, really good. It's just a great change. It's so much easier to understand what's going to be happening on your screen. I hope that they kind of keep the game easy in terms of visual clarity. I hope it doesn't kind of get to the stage that Path of Exile's at now, where you can't really see things happening on the screen all the time. Because that kind of goes hand in hand with this system of knowing what you can block or evade just by seeing it. And they've already spoke about this. They have system in place for like damage types based on colors, right? Mm-hmm. So fireball comes in, it's dealing fire damage because it's like a red or orangey color, right? If there's another ball flying into you and it's like an blue, like light blue, cold looking, that's probably what it is. It deals cold damage. And you've got like purple ground on the floor, that's a chaos degen, right? So they kind of are leaning into that more, I think. The idea of having the player know what's happening on the screen and being able to kind of understand before something actually happens.
And if there's a boss...
Cat flying off my lap.
Totally fine. And if there's a boss attack that you can't block, the boss like highlights red for a brief moment before the attack. So you know which attacks are blockable, which aren't. So you can read the game. You don't have to, you know, go to PoEDB or PoE2DB, you know, analyze, okay, this is actually how the skill works. Like, it is blockable. It deals this type of damage, right? Because I know a lot of people, like Ben, the super high skill people, they have to go and they have to read all that to make sure that they're creating their defenses properly. Hopefully in PoE2, that's not necessarily necessary.
Yeah, I just think it's a great change.
Honestly, like, I feel like that was just the best possible, like, education of my thinking there, because like I genuinely was thinking that, and that, like, everything you've just said, straight away I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because they're taking the complexity out of the stat side of it, because they've increased the complexity of the gameplay experience of it. So as a whole, it's like you're just in the moment, more reacting to the situation with reactive defenses rather than proactive stat building. So it's wow.
It's awesome. Just more. It's so much more. It's like in Path of Exile 1, right? You invest into block. Let's say, I mean, right now the patch right now is the best example, actually, because there's so many people playing Svarlin, right, in this patch. So you just got block maxed out, or you're playing Gladiator with Lucky Block. You're just like standing in the map and there's nothing's hitting you, right? That's just what's going on. And realistically, you just, it doesn't really matter what's coming in your direction. As a player using those items, you generally believe that you're just going to block everything. That's just kind of, you're not actually looking at things that are happening. Like, here comes some projectiles or whatever, because you just can't see it. Like, there's way too much going on the screen, right?
It's like to the point where you want to get hit, right? Because you've got your Shaper shield that's giving you 5% life on block, right? So it's like silly.
So it just makes more sense to have this system where you just kind of understand that this is the things that I can and can't block. And I think they even said that there's going to be telegraphed boss mechanics that are telegraphed as unblockable or, you know, unavailable, right? In that case, you're going to need to use your dodge roll to get out of that AoE before you get hit.
Yeah. And you know something we haven't even mentioned during this entire discussion? Active block. That's going to be a thing too. I wonder how that's going to differentiate from passive block. Like, if there will be scenarios in which passive block doesn't work, active block does, or certain mechanics will work with active block, but not uh-oh. I don't want to open that jar of worms. Oh, God.
I am really interested to see it. Maybe they just get rid of... I mean, they have said that passive block is still a thing, but I don't believe they've spoken about that recently.
No.
So it'd be interesting to see if they've actually got rid of that entirely, because it does kind of make sense that if you have active block and if it's like a big deal and they're kind of leaning into that, you know, your shield is in front of you. If you have passive block as well and you're blocking things that are hitting your back, you know, while you're using active block, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because they are leaning into the active block thing. So I don't know, but perhaps active block will be a thing and passive block won't, or perhaps passive block is a thing and they find a way to do it in a way where, you know, it's like you're using your active block from the front, and during this period of time you don't have passive block because your shield is up in front of you, right? You can't block things that are hitting around your back and stuff. So perhaps that
seems most likely. But yeah, we just don't know, do we? It's like, have you guys thought about, because I've started to think about, last night on stream, I was just like streaming some design art stuff for the Ascendancy stuff, and we got talking about Duelist. And I was like, I think Duelist is the hardest class thematically to come up with Ascendancies for. I was like, couldn't really think of, there wasn't obvious things that were going on in my mind. And we were chatting about it, and one of the mechanics that I thought was like, that seems really obvious to me, is some kind of parry mechanic. So instead of blocking, you're triggering, you're time blocking parrying to create some kind of like, you know, riposte, or, you know, like whatever, right? Some kind of like skill that you're triggering as a parry. And we haven't seen anything about this because I imagine they haven't got too deep into it, or they're just not ready to show it or whatever. But what do you guys think about that? Because I think that will be a thing in the game that you'll get. If you've got this active block thing, then why wouldn't you have like an active parry that's more of like an offensive block? Like, and I'm guessing, and also I guess tied into this, the retribution skills or the retaliation skills that we've just got in 3.2.5, surely they're going to be triggered off of active block timing as well, right? As we've kind of seen already a bit in some of the warrior gameplay and stuff. I don't know, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Hard agree. That's it. I told Jonathan, I'm like, gotta have a parry. You can't continue to disregard your dual wielders. That is what I always played in like D&D. I was always dual wielding like scimitars, stuff like that. But in Path of Exile, I mean, until Cleave of Rage came in, I was a shield boy, or a two-hander. So, Dreamcore, I don't know your thoughts.
I think so. For duelist, as you said, the classes are hard to design. I actually think we'll see. I think Gladiator will be back for sure. Yeah. That's just like a.
It's the obvious.
And it kind of makes sense if they are gonna go, because I expect to see like Templar having some kind of flail and shield class, and I think that the warrior will have some kind of shield class as well, because it just kind of makes sense that the warrior would do something with a shield and be like that tanky class, which leaves the gladiator probably not focused on shields this time. I think it will be focused on dual wielding, like you said. I think it's going to be like a dual wielding thing. Like parries make the most sense. Being focused on typical gladiator.
He's just seen it.
But yeah, so I think it will be. I mean, come on, it paid out, didn't it? Because we have gladiator now.
It's true.
But
so
yeah,
popular.
So yeah, like dual wielding, parries, and that sort of stuff will make sense. And I do expect. I think Slayer will definitely make a return. Slayer's like just absolutely iconic, I think, as like an ascendancy. It's basically the definitive melee ascendancy for me. And Champion.
No.
Champion is very weird. Like they basically killed that class in this patch, and I'm not really sure. How would they even do Champion in Path of Exile 2? Because it's like aura focused and kind of like it's very. I mean, now it's very supporty themed. I mean, they could do something like that. But yeah, I definitely expect to see Gladiator and dual wields lent into quite a bit there.
Gladiator especially, because internally for a bit they were calling Duelist Glad. They can't get rid of that entire fantasy, I think it's staying in.
Yeah, it would be weird. The only other one that we came up with, without going into too much of a side tangent, was like some kind of pirate or swashbuckler. But then we're like, maybe that's a merc class, right? Because it's like this kind of potentially gunpowder thing or something, like crossbows. I don't know, but that's the only thing.
Yeah, I would say that's more of
a
merc theme, I would say.
Yeah. But yeah.
All right. Let's get into. So we have a few topics to discuss. We've been kind of meandering a little bit. We learned a lot of stuff about skill gems and gems in general over the past few months. A ridiculous amount. The more I've thought about it, the more I've decided that back in 2023, PoE 2, when it was announced to be a separate game from PoE 1, I was initially shocked at that. And the more I see like the big changes that they've made over the past year, I think it's because from an external point of view, I don't know if it was different enough from Path of Exile 1 at that point. I don't know if that's a hot take or not. But as I'm seeing all the huge changes that they've made over the past year, the addition of WASD, crossplay, cross progression, the fact that you can only use one support skill across all your entire character, all this radical stuff that was basically, not there in 2023. It was just, okay, we updated the skill socket system, but skill gems, they work basically the same. They're just not in your gear, right? All this stuff has changed in the past year. And now I think it's a much more distinct game. But on the skill gem point, what do you guys think about that first thing? Support gems only being able to be used once. And I'm curious to see what the chat has to say too, because a lot of people have had a lot of discussions about it, saying that this is either A, going to inhibit build diversity, or B, it's going to be the best thing for build diversity ever. So I want to hear your two takes on it.
Dream.
Okay, so initially I was in the camp of this is going to kill build diversity. The reason why I was in that camp is because the way I saw this change going was that you'd have a specific set of support gems that you would use with a skill, right? I mean, you can just think about how it works right now. You're using a particular skill, you want to use GMP on it because it's just too good, and then you've got some other gems, whatever. It doesn't really matter what gems are, but some creator makes a build guide for a skill, and they use these support gems, right? And it becomes kind of the de facto go-to, these are the support gems for that skill. From that perspective, I had the idea that this is going to kind of kill the way how this works, because people are not going to really think. They're just going to, you know, these skill gems go with this skill, and then they're already used at that point, right? So now you're going to use something else. Perhaps you have some like utility. There's some like special utility supports for a movement skill, and that's already taken because you're definitely always using this thing or whatever, or some, you know, not movement skill, but you know what I mean, some kind of utility, some utility-based skill. But I actually don't have that opinion anymore, because I think from everything that I've heard Jonathan saying recently about that change makes a whole lot of sense. They're really leaning into the idea of having ridiculous amount of choice when it comes to supporting your skills, and how you can go about doing like any number of things. You can just attack it from a different direction and do things differently. There's not like a one trick thing for this. It's like I can go, you know, from lots of different angles. So I think overall that change is the way how it's going to feel in the end is all about how many support gems they can get into the game that actually feel meaningful.
That's it.
You know,
I think that's the big qualifier. 100%.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it, mate. When I remember watching the first like trailer, the first I ever saw of Path of Exile was like beta footage. Crip was playing, I think it was Crip, and he was on the beach, and he was like, I remember just seeing some footage, and he was talking about how like, oh, you know, one of the really cool things about this game is like you can support your skills, you know, and he had like ground slam, and then he was like, oh, and I can do this, and then he had like multiple projectiles. I remember seeing multiple projectiles and being like, whoa, this is crazy. You're like building your own skill trees for your skills, because that's the only way I could frame it at that time, because I played D2 and I was like, you're creating your own branches with these little sockets. And I think, you know, obviously that spiraled into the huge success of PoE. That was a really unique element of it. And it's so interesting to me that I agree with you completely that they need to chuck tons and tons of gems into the game. But I think like such a simple change from like just adding that one limit of 1 now creates like, they can kind of go completely wild with this, because they can't ever really mess up the meta completely. Like say at every league they add one support gem that's just completely busted, right? Like because they're going crazy. They feel free to finally live out like the fantasy of this, what I imagine the original idea for the support system was, which was craft your own skill. It's like crafting your own spell in D&D or something. It's like absolute like dream stuff that you can do. And it gives you that power fantasy. And now they're free that like they can't break the game too much, right? If they put in like GMP that has like additional damage, right? One league, and then everyone's just like, cool, well it's the GMP league, right? Because every skill is just now like using this, and but because of the reliance on multiple skills and stuff like that, I just love the freedom it's adding to them. And it kind of feels like, weirdly, with such a simple change, they've stumbled upon the ultimate vision of what they had 13 years ago, which was like, craft your own skill. And now, like you're saying, Dream, I think everyone's version of a build is going to feel slightly different. And there's no better feeling as a PoE player, in my opinion, than the way I like to play the game, at least, than like feeling like you've got your own little special KFC like sauce, you know, herbs and spices version of something. And I think this is going to be like our 11 herbs and spices, you know? It's like, oh, cool, but I decided to go with Frozen Nexus, motherfucker. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't swear.
Totally fine. That's okay.
You know, that's the vibe.
I totally agree that they're going to go bananas with these support gems, and they can try out all this wacky stuff. There's a support gem on PoE2DB that I think has been seen in the beta footage, so not the beta footage, but just open footage so far. I think it's called Fortress Support. And what it does is it changes a skill that is usually a wall, and it turns it into a circle. Now, I don't know how this works with like skills that are lines. Are those considered walls or whatever? But that just opened up like the possibility, something like Volcanic Fissure of Snaking, a support gem that changes it from a line into like a circle around you. That simple change then allows you to like combo it together with slams in such a new and interesting way, and just the fact that will be able to experiment with all these different supports and all these different skill gems, it's just going to be wild. Like, it's going to be meaningful experimentation too, right? It's not just going to be, okay, we're getting 5% increased damage from this support gem, right? Oh, we're getting 15% from this one. And in PoE 1, like, the numbers are very implicit with the bonuses. I think in PoE 2, we're going to actually be changing the way the skill works and functions. And then, of course, there's going to be damage related to that. And I'm sure there will be some damage-based supports. But all of them just seem so much more fun, you know? Like, I love things that physically change the way the skills look. I love when that happens. And it seems like they're heavily leaning into that with support gems. And then I know we haven't seen a lot of them, but like unique items, it sounds like that's what's happening, say with Ascendancies. Oh, I'm just so excited. It's good. I think it's a good change, and I'm glad. It seems like we're all in agreement. I said we're in an echo chamber here because everyone in the chat's like, amazing change, amazing change. So, you know, good stuff.
I think one thing that really sold me on that change was Jonathan talking about adding support gems that you basically only want to use on one ability, right? Yeah. Like, they're going to be fairly limited because they just don't really have, like, the wall one that you just talked about. I just see that only working on a few skills that create like walls. It might be like 2 skills that make walls, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that they're adding those support gems to the game that even have an extremely limited use case is the thing that sold me. I was like, okay, that's great, because now like there's always going to be like something that you can do.
And there's room for expansion in the future. So maybe it only works with 2 skills right now.
Yeah.
But heck, we know that Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile 1, with their limited ability to create new skills and how difficult it was, you know, they kept chucking out new skills for many, many leagues. In PoE 2 now, you know, they're able to rig up stuff very easily. They have a far larger animation staff and effects staff. Oh, what if there's like, you know, like 10 juicy new skills every league, you guys? Oh, it's just, love it.
What if this is so successful, they never need to bring back Transfigured Gems? Because it's just like, cool, you want it to do this, like, there you go, right? Like, because for a while, I think we might have even talked about this on one of the past podcasts, but like Transfigured Gems, I think were universally one of the greatest design changes in the game. I think like
in PoE 1,
I think that it was, I think in PoE 1 that was just like a really well received thing. It elegantly tied up a load of systems, and it was just really cool. And it opened up the opportunity, like you're saying, to design so many more interesting skill gems. But maybe like this is their way of kind of solving that, right? It's like, well, we don't have to make like, you know, Ice Wall of Fortress. We just have this weird little thing, like you're saying, Dream, right? Like it's like, oh, it's just this little thing that you can change. It's so cool. It's so cool. It honestly feels like spellcrafting. It's like it's the coolest thing of like being able to change your skill how you want.
Yeah, you saying that makes complete sense. We're getting our own Transfigured Gems. We get to build them ourselves. So
yeah.
100%. That almost what it feels like. The Ice Wall of Fortressing thing. That's.
I don't really see Transfigured Gems in Path of Exile 2. Maybe
I don't think so.
Like very far down the line, possibly, but yeah, it's not really something. I just see Transfigured Gems as something that they did with Path of Exile 1 because it makes sense for them from like a time investment perspective to make modified versions of gems rather than adding new gems, you know, to the game.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, wonderful. So that was change number 1. Good discussion there. Let's go into change number... Well, actually, I'm curious. Before we go into that, I know, Sylver, there was something that you wanted to bring up to do with an orb that we thought was gone from the game. I still think it might be gone from the game, but apparently it's still in the game? What did you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Apparently, yes. So, I was just catching up on stuff, and then I saw an interview with a Brazilian content creator. God, his name is escaping me right now, but I've got a link somewhere. But yeah, so in that interview, they were just talking about lots of different things, and then it came up that Jonathan was talking about the fusing orb. I don't know if you want to show the clip, or I can just explain it. It's up to you how you want to do it. But
explain it.
Yeah, so basically, Jonathan was saying, oh, well, we don't need fusing orbs anymore because obviously the gems are linked in, you know, so we don't need the links in items anymore, right? And then he was like, oh, but fusing orbs actually are currently still in the game, but they just have a very different use. And the guy was like, what? Like, what do you mean? And then he was like, all he said was they're currently a very end game thing to do with character power. And I was like,
know what it is.
What the hell could that be, right? Like,
it's so easy.
Is that recombinators? Is that like something are they changing recombinators to be an orb?
I think
right?
So.
Okay, like that could be amazing. Or I think the interviewer, he said, he was like, oh, maybe it's like awakeners orbs, right? They become like some way of like, which is, I guess, some sort of version of recombinators to a degree. But yeah, this idea of like fusing items together or something like that. But yeah, so currently we don't know, but I was curious what you guys think that might be. Obviously, you've said, Try, you think it'd be recombinators. That was my first thought as well.
I think it's going to be recombinators 100%. If it's going to be an end game focused crafting currency, that's the one thing, because it makes so much sense. Fusing, orbs of fusing two items together, smashing them together. The absolute lovely reception. Oh, he didn't say.
He said player power, which could be anything, right? So, because the only other thing that came to my mind was, what if it's a way of like some really rare, weird way, kind of like Forbidden Flesh and Flame, they change up so you could fuse ascendancy, like an ascendancy node from another ascendancy or something onto your tree or something like that? I was like, oh, maybe. I know that's crazy. I'm talking crazy now.
Saying I'm on copium, dude. I have no idea what that would be used for. The only thing that, I mean, right now you can use fusing, so there's some vendor recipes to, fuse two unique items together. So it's possibly that it's something like that. Maybe, so this is actually something, that really interesting unique items, like powerful unique items. They've already said they want to do that in Path of Exile 2. They've said that it's not a Path of Exile game without things like Headhunter and stuff like that. I think it would be kind of interesting if there's some really strong items, a bit like how Kingmaker works right now, right? So you have Soul Taker, which is super rare, right? I think it's a tier 0 unique. And then you've got, what's the other one called? Is it Heartbreaker, the like dagger? It's not very rare, but you need both of those. And then you do like a vendor recipe with a fusing and it makes Kingmaker. Right, so that perhaps it's something like that. Perhaps these fusings are going to be very rare, like very rare currency, and they're used to combine unique items together to like create a unique that doesn't drop.
That's a really cool idea. Cool. That's a good off-the-cuff idea.
So then, what do you guys think about? Because that kind of gets into a little bit of the idea around. They've said that they want our items to kind of be like these projects that we work on and craft. And then it feels like, last Epoch came out and it was like, hey, here's these like exalted items and then you can smash them into a unique and you get this like legendary item. I think I'm saying that right. And it's like a unique item with additional stats that you can like smash onto it, right? And you can imagine how like a fusing orb you could imagine like, oh yeah, well you fuse an item onto a unique and it gets one of the stats or something. Like they could literally copy that system. I don't think they will because it'd be a bit weird maybe to copy it. But so like it opens up interesting things like you're saying about the journey of a unique, because kind of what you're reminding me of there as well is like thinking about prophecy and how you'd get these kind of like, I can't remember the name of them. Do you guys remember? Like, but these prophesized uniques, you'd get like the full version of it if you completed a prophecy.
Fated uniques.
Thank you. So, and like that was a really cool idea, but it was just the prophecy system was a bit weird and stuff like that. So, kind of what you're talking about there is like yes, there's these recipes which would be cool, but I wonder if they could expand that system into some kind of like, well, you have a unique, but it can grow with you on this journey. I come up with this whole idea. I'll release a video at some point about it down the road, but about this like promise system, so that you don't have quality, you have promise on an item, kind of like legendary potential. It's a bit like that with some other stuff mixed in, and it kind of like allows you to like alter a unique in some way, or like find like this unique has promise, right? I don't know. Like, do you think there'll be anything like that where we take uniques to like, there's a way to craft uniques or like evolve them over time?
I think, if anything, I think they like you to have crafting projects a lot of the time, and they want the most powerful things to be rares, right? So maybe we'll see something like what we saw in Calgar, which is essentially rares that are being imprinted with unique properties onto them, right? So it'd kind of be the opposite. It wouldn't be, oh, I'm getting these few properties on a unique item. I'm crafting a rare, and then I'm trying to smash some unique properties onto it. I think that could have been a precursor of what's to come, and it's kind of the opposite of what like last Epoch and D4 does. So it'd be their own unique take on it.
Mod. Imagine if you like and you're just smashing like mage bloods onto like a micro distillery belt or something, right? Like you're just like, come on, just give me that one stat.
That'd be good. Cool. All right. I think one other skill gem specific change that I wanted to touch on with you guys is the way that leveling works with skill gems in Path of Exile 2. Because it kind of didn't make sense to me, the change, until I heard it explained. And I don't know if you guys know the full extent of the change. I'm sure you guys have kept tuned in with like the info, but now you don't have experience for gems in Path of Exile 2, and support gems don't even have levels in Path of Exile 2. You level up your skill gems with uncut gems of various levels. That's how leveling gems works. What do you guys think about that change?
Dream.
Genius.
Right? Because when Jonathan said, like, all you do right now is you just, like, press a plus button and there's no other thought behind it, like, there's no choice, you know? There's nothing actually going
Making
on
the level
there.
up skills is just so annoying. And
right.
The difference between... So, obviously, they had to make the difference between level 1 support gem and level 20 support gem very big because the whole system was, like, progressing power of support gems. But realistically, you know, it doesn't really matter if the gem is leveling up or not. Like, the end game is that the gem gets to 20, and to get it to 20, you're just playing like normal. You're not doing anything different. All you're doing is occasionally clicking the right-hand side of your screen to level up the gem. There's no real feeling of progression, you know, with skill gems being leveled, with support gems being leveled up. So I think that's a great change.
Yeah, now you have an actual choice every time you get an uncut gem. You know, you can level up one of your old gems. You can choose a new one to add to your repertoire. It's once again like such a small change that I think has made such a massive impact differentiating the two games, because that's something that'll never leave Path of Exile 1. You're always going to be clicking, leveling up those skill gems in PoE 1. You're always going to have
requirements.
Right. You're always going to have as many different brutality supports on your character in Path of Exile 1. In Path of Exile 2, now there's so many more distinctions. So, Sylver, I don't know. Did you collect your thoughts?
Yeah, this was one of those where, because I think it was in the Ziggy interview that I first really saw them talk about this and go into it. And you know, they're just like beaming about the change. You know, they're like Mark saying, you know, the game's just 50% better all of a sudden. You know, from like this like tiny change. You know, I think that was the quote. And I think this, when I first heard it, it didn't dawn on me. Like I couldn't understand what it was that like why it would feel so impactful, like why they were making such a big like wow, this just completely changed the game. And then I started to think when Jonathan compared it to D2 and how like, oh, you actually get a point now, you know, and it's kind of like, but it's this variable point because maybe you got like 5 points because you dropped a super high level gem, right? So you've essentially just got like, you know, in D2 terms, like 5 skill points out of a drop, you know, which like feels amazing. And that, I was like, okay, no, that feels exciting. Yeah, I can kind of get that. And then when they were like, oh, there's no support gem levels, like you guys say, I'm like, yeah, now that's starting to feel a bit better. The only thing that I guess like I did think was, will we still get quality on support gems, and will there be like a whole quality system? Because I think that could still feel good, because it's very different to just like playing the game and leveling up automatically, basically like brain dead, as opposed to like, you know, like where GCPs are now, where you're like, oh, when I find a quality gem, well, it's weird because there's so much access to quality gems from drops at the minute with different things, different league mechanics and stuff. But I think if getting quality gems went back to how it was a long time ago, where it was like hard to do, I feel like that could be really exciting as well. Like if someone had like a 2020, getting back to that being like, whoa, you've had to like spend like a level 20 uncut gem and a load of GCPs, or you found this, you know, and getting that back to feeling amazing. So yeah, I think all in all, I can start to see why they're seeing it as like a huge thing. But I think until I play it, it's one of those that won't really feel.
I think quality will remain because they're still going to want those parameters in which you can min-max your character. And that's like one of the things. If they're removing a lot of just like, the raw damage from abilities, from skills and support gems and like, I think they're still going to want to scratch that itch of people being able to incrementally build power on the gems where you can, you know, increase the quality and everything. I think that's going to stay in the game. But I agree with you. I like, you know, making it a little bit harder maybe, you know, so it's not so easy to max out your gems. Your character journey is longer, right?
Yeah, like what if you're level 95 and get like most people who are 95 don't have level 20 gems? Because it's like a proper, you know, getting like your level 20 gem is like
we don't know.
Really rare. Like
it sounds like it's supposed to be hard, though.
Yeah.
Like they're supposed to be actual items of value, almost like awakened gems. That's kind of what they sound like. Like a level 20 gem is kind of legendary. It's like got a mystique in those first 3-4 days of the league. You're not going to be seeing a lot of those, and you'll pay, you know, a pretty penny or a pretty chaos or whatever we trade in for those level 20 gems, because those people getting them, they're just super lucky, you know, and they're making.
I think they'll try to get the drop rate sort of correct for what time they want a character to have a level 20 gem, you know, skill gem. So it'll probably be roughly the same as what it is now. But obviously, if it is based on just getting a drop, which at the moment it looks like it is going to be that, unless there's some kind of way of, because we know that they're doing in the campaign, they're doing like targeted drops that are sort of hidden in the area. Like Jonathan was talking about how in the Vile Ruins there's going to be chests that you can kind of open, and you know there's one of every different like base type, you know, referring to, you know, there's one pure armor chest piece, one evasion chest piece, things like that you can then take and craft upon if you need an upgrade in that particular area. So I can't really see them. I mean, could they fit that feature in some way when you're progressing maps? I don't really see it. So maybe it's just going to be a full RNG thing.
What if they have, you know, like a seeded drop? Like the first time you kill PoE2's equivalent of the Shaper, you get a level 20 gem. The first time, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll consider something like that, or if that takes away too much of the, you know, mystique of drops and everything.
If level 20 gems are like gonna turn out to be this like kind of chase item almost, because that's kind of what they're kind of becoming, right? Is like if they are gonna be drops, it turns it into like quite a special drop. Like, do you think it'd be cool? This is totally out there, ridiculous idea, but like, do you think it'd be cool if you had like capstone abilities? You know, like in D&D, when you get to level 20, you get like a capstone ability, right? Like you get this like version of the gem that, imagine like you get a level 20 gem and it's like there's a special mod that you get that are essentially awakened versions.
Right, level 5 awakened. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, like imagine like you're like, cool, you finally get your level 20, because it would feel a bit rubbish if you're level 19, it takes like 100 hours of grinding to get your 20 and it's like plus 2% more damage. And you're like, cool, well, I guess it's cool I've got 20 gems. But imagine if it like awakened the gem when it got to 20, right? And then it's like, okay, cool, you get, you know, plus 1 prod or, you know, whatever the thing is, like crazy thing.
It could be an upgrade at gem level 20. Yeah, it's possible. They do like a more, but can they do that for every gem? Like, is there enough design space for every gem? Like, obviously, you've made the thing there of like plus 1 projectile, which makes a lot of sense. Easy. And then on some support gems, we've got like plus 1 gem level. We've got exposure, things like that, right? Different things on the support gems, the awakened support gems. Is there enough design space to do that for every gem, like at level 20? You know, I mean, there could be, like, for example, with a slam, you could be like, the AoE gets, you know, 20% more AoE at gem level 20. It's just like suddenly you're doing these huge earthquakes rather than, you know.
Yeah, that would feel wicked. Because then it would make sense that you could then make them a lot rarer, right? Like you could then make it really rare, because then it would feel so noticeable when you got your 20 versus like, I don't know, because then we're getting into weird things like thematically it doesn't make sense to go from 18 to 19 with 2% bonus and then 19 to 20 Like, actually calling them awakened gems then makes more sense, right? Because it has some awakened capability or something. So, I don't know. Anyway, that was a total tangent. I'm taking it away, of course. Try, back to you in the studio.
No, tangents are beautiful. This is a beautiful podcast. Okay, one last gem change that I think is very interesting. I haven't seen a lot of discussion on it. Now, you can't just use limitless numbers of gems on your character. Gems are tied back to your attributes. So for every 5 of each attribute, you can use a different color, or I think the more proper term now is going to be attribute type of gem. So for every 5 dex, you can use 1 + 1 green or dex gem. Same for intelligence, same for strength, right? They all tie back to that. So it makes your attribute points matter, and it makes your travel nodes on the passive tree matter as well. And obviously on the passive skill tree, we can choose 5 from any of the attributes on all those travel nodes. And then we can get attributes on gear. What do you guys think? Is that gonna actually be something that we're gonna be toying with in game? Is it gonna be almost meaningless if we can get substantial numbers of attributes on gear? How do you think that that's gonna play out, this whole change to the system?
I don't think it's going to be mean. Go on, you go.
I think we're about to say the same thing, dude. I was like, I don't think it's going to be very substantive. I think it's basically just like making the whole system a bit easier, to be honest. I almost feel like it's a way of them still having attributes without really having to deal with attribute problems. Because I think they might have identified in testing that one of the big frustrations that people were experiencing and wasn't being very fun was like, hey, you need another free dexterity. And people were like, this sucks. So that, to be honest, like, I know that sounds like dumbing down the game, but I've never personally felt like an incredibly inspiring moment playing PoE where I've been like, yes, I got like my attribute requirements sorted, you know? Like, so
what are you talking about? Like, you liar. I get so pissed every time I take off a piece of gear, and then I have to take off all my gems to re-equip the piece of gear because it has the necessary attributes. You don't get a feeling of just pure bliss when you do that?
No, wild, right? So yeah, so I think that will have come up in testing, and I think they will have basically just gone like, let's just make this super flexible, like kind of not a thing, but still then they have attributes in the game, which is important because then it, you know, obviously affects other systems and items and things. So, yeah, I'm really curious actually to see. I think attributes is going to be one of those things that we're going to see a lot of flux over the early access period, where they go from like, okay, you now get 5 life from 1 strength, or now you get 2, or like, I think they're going to be playing around with that quite a lot because it seems more important than ever, but the requirements seem less important than ever, and that feels like a really good change to me.
Yeah, I think there's only going to be that friction maybe while you're leveling, but you know, once you're a decent amount of progression to the game, you're basically not worrying about it, and I like that.
But the attributes themselves will be more important, I think, later in the game, right? Because that's where your life is coming from and stuff.
Life especially. Well, are we going to get into a state where everybody's taking strength? What do you guys think? Because you're getting life from where? Your level?
It depends how much life is on gear.
Right. If they have the PoE 1 levels, you know, maybe that's a precursor. Big life amounts.
Because we don't. So where I see life going in Path of Exile 2 is the increased life stat is much rarer and very, very powerful when you actually do get it. Because you're going to have way more flat life. You're going to have more flat life from strength, and you're presumably going to have a lot of flat life from gear, similar to how we got in this patch, right? Maybe that was even a PoE 2 thing, right? Like the flat life balance in this patch.
Yeah.
So I think that increased life will be something that's reserved for powerful, unique items and things like that. As to whether, I don't really see people deliberately like stacking strength to get life unless it's part of that build that they're playing. You know, like a like strength stacking build. And I also don't think that, because I heard people talking about this, like saying that strength stackers are going to be OP, you know, because there's like more life coming from strength. What they haven't factored in is that increased life is basically gone from the tree, which means that you know, every point that you get of strength that's giving you more life, realistically, it's probably actually giving you less life in comparison because you don't have all that increased life to multiply it.
Dang it, Dream. What the hell? Logic.
Strength stacking Andy over here.
Yeah.
But,
dude, you're so right. Because then the variation between like the very top end and the very low end of what life becomes actually, I think, will then shrink, right, by that logic. Which should mean that balancing fights should be a little bit easier. Again, leaning into this more like, how are you mechanically dealing with the fight? Like, of course, you'll be able to scale your life if you choose to, and then like maybe take a few boss hits that another player couldn't. But if that window, you know, I think one of the cool things that you look at, like, you know, Captain Lance's ES project and stuff like that, it's like these really cool things in the game where you're like, yeah, wicked, let's see if we can get to 50,000 ES, right? Or like, you know, 15,000 life for like, you know, the Arrow of Vigor. Well, I'm forgetting the name of it.
Burning Arrow of Vigor,
Burning Arrow of Vigor, right? Like, those things are really cool, but the problem is they do trivialize, they create other problems in the game, balance-wise, that you then have to, I imagine the designers then have to balance around, which is like, well, what do we do with players that can get 40,000 ES, right? Like, or something crazy. So,
that's kind of the power fantasy, right? Like that's those things exist. They're at the very top end. Like, I mean, no one in SSF, for example, is getting 40,000 ES, right? It's just it would take you more than an entire league to get that ridiculous levels of gear. But I think so. From like a balance perspective, though, they can be a lot more creative with this change. Like, for example, right now, you know, blood magic in Path of Exile 1, it's got like a little bit more life modifier on it, and really you're taking that to solve skill cost. That was the whole idea of blood magic. Then over time, people just realized that this keystone's garbage, right? Because it's just complete garbage. Like, I removed my mana and I was reserving all of my mana for auras. Now I only have one aura. So, and then only in this patch, you know, where people have actually decided that actually, now that auras have been nerfed a bit and now you can use blood magic. But imagine in PoE 2, if there's no increased life on the tree and increased life is really scarce, what if blood magic just has 100% increased life, right, on it? Because you're removing your entire mana, and we know already in Path of Exile 2 that mana is going to be more of something that they expect people to use for its intended purpose. Right, like that's here's like mana mechanics, and you can actually see yourself using mana mechanics on a non-mana based character, because that's kind of the design philosophy they've gone for. There's no more reserving all of your mana away. Every character's going to have their mana pool unless you remove it with something like blood magic, and I assume blood magic's still going to be in the game because it's the iconic keystone. So you can imagine that blood magic could have something like, you know, like I said, 100% increased life, and suddenly it's that like life stacker avenue. You know, you have that kind of thing there, but you lose all of those mana mechanics, and there'll probably be a lot of things attached to mana because they want people to use and interact with it. So,
how are you guys feeling about the Flask system? I know there's been some discussion as of late again about Flasks. Sylver, I saw you responded to a Path of Exile 2 subreddit post because I'm a big lurker there. Not big talker there anymore. I just lurk. What do you guys think about Flasks? Now that we're just talking like Flasks and mana.
Oh man.
The 5 Flask system, like, why are they sticking with it? Why are they doing it?
Why did you bring this up, Try?
Why are they doing it?
This is a biggie. So I think it's such a... I think out of all the things in in PoE that we've heard from a design point of view and like the conversation around it, I feel like it's the least solved, if I can put it that way. Like, from a design point of view, it seems like the one with the most loose ends, the most contentious, the most like uncertain from our point of view, because we've just the history of it. Obviously, we've seen they went from like being very stringent with flask charges in the first demo that you went out and played, Try, and then we saw them revert that change to be more like PoE 1, where you get a lot of charges, and then people are then like, we've then seen the console versions of the game where you basically have like a single button that or maybe not randomly, but tries to intelligently use
left to right
versions of the same flask or something, right?
It's left to right, yeah, with charges.
Which is janky, like unless it's really intelligent and it just knows like, oh, you're on low life, I'm going to use your instant on low life flask or something. Like maybe they've solved that. But without going on a big old rant about it, basically, I think the most middle ground suggestion I've seen, which made sense to me, was like, maybe just try like 1 life flask, 1 mana flask, and 1 utility flask, and then like that can help solve like the button mashing problem and stuff, and maybe add some more like options to what those flasks can do. So maybe you can get like freeze and poison immunity on a utility or something, right? But then the question becomes, what's the freaking point? Because like, if you've just got a utility flask that's kind of solving everything, like that's just a oh no button, then like, why have we got utility flasks in the first place? And if they're reactive, like guard skills, like why not make them guard skills? I don't know. Honestly, it's the I have no good answers to this, but I really think there's something here in terms of like, I think this is a design space that GGG are gonna have to continue to explore and find a solution to as we go through early access.
Oh,
that's my
hard agree on a lot of those points. I'm gonna be a devil's advocate in just a second. I have to bring up someone from the chat. Have either of you guys played Elden Ring?
No,
I haven't.
No?
I've watched people play it, but I haven't.
Oh my god! So you guys are like me. Okay, so I'm the only Elden Ring vet in the chat. That's insane. That's crazy. In Elden Ring, you have 1 flask, so you can like decide what the flask does. So you can like upgrade it and change it. And Omega Cybers has talked about this before too. But somebody in the chat said we should have that and a drinking animation. No.
Crazy.
No drinking animation in Path of Exile 2. Get out of here.
I love the idea. Like you're fighting Shaper and you're just like.
This kind of reminds me of. I don't know if you guys have played Monster Hunter, but in Monster Hunter, I remember I played with a group of friends, and there's this class that had like I was using like a hunting horn, right, to give people buffs and stuff. But in that, there's potions that you can use, and there's like a mechanic, but that's got the old drinking animation, the potion and stuff, and you're like, well, you're basically stunned while you're drinking the potion, because you're walking around really slowly. No, none of that. No, no, like drinking animation.
I don't know. But yeah, I'm a big fan of it.
When it comes to flasks in Path of Exile 2, I agree with Sylver. I think it's the one thing that they haven't solved it yet. I mean, by looking at the game, I don't think it looks great right now, flasks. If you go onto the Path of Exile 2 website right now, you can scroll down to a character screen there that shows like the gear, and there's like a life flask there. I think there's 2 life flasks, 2 mana flasks on that character, and then there's a antidote potion, which it just removes poison. That's all it does. I think that. So. They've got flasks to a point in Path of Exile 1 right now where you can basically just click some utility flasks and have them automate and just go off whenever. They just go off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that removed a lot of the whole flask piano thing, but it does remove the kind of way that the player uses them effectively. That's removed from the player. Like, for example, from a hardcore perspective, this is why, like, Scissorin talked about this recently. This is why he doesn't really use those things in hardcore, because you can't really tell when those things are actually going to go off and when you're not going to have them, for example, and things like that. So that's not really a great solution either. But then if you slim this whole system down to where, like, I'm carrying a flask just for the purpose of I get poisoned. Like, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like, just... I think there just needs to be 1 flask slot for a life flask, 1 for a mana flask, and then... those flask slots change based on so for example, I just brought up the blood magic keystone, right? Let's say that blood magic has another line on it that changes the mana flask slot into another life flask slot, and let's say that chaos inoculation changes the life flask slot into some other slot that affects energy shield. We don't know. I mean, maybe it makes your life flask affect your energy shield or something, right? But there's got to be a better way to solve these problems of like getting poisoned or something like that. I can't imagine that there's a flask slot. Like I've got a flask for solving poison, a flask for solving bleed. It's the only thing that it does. Flask for solving ignite. Like how often am I getting these things, and am I gonna have to remember where all of these slots are? You know, there's already like 4 extra buttons of WASD. Now I've got like 5 buttons that I have to press them. And is there going to be automation? Like, am I going to equip a antidote flask for poison, and then I'm going to enchant it to say use when I get poisoned? What is the point of that? Like, if that exists, what's the point of that whole mechanic?
I don't think there's going to be automation.
I'm not even... Right, so
it's going to be a lot of button pressing. Or ailments will be far rarer than they currently are in Path of Exile 1. And the flasks will be reserved for very specific scenarios. But that also that relies on like grinding your games, balancing the game to actually have that in mind, because you can't have every single pack where this pack poisons, this pack ignites, another poison pack. It'd have to be far and few in between. Otherwise, you're right, Dreamcore. You're going to be constantly pressing those buttons over and over and over again, right?
And it becomes a hardcore nightmare, right? Like, because so just like you were saying about what Ziz was saying, like, so you're going through hardcore. You need to know every monster in every area with every mod type in order to pack the right flask for that area. Like, it's just like
600 plus monsters, by the way.
I don't know. It just seems untenable. Like,
I'm just a little bit confused with the design idea behind flasks, because we already know that in Path of Exile 2, a lot of these things that we take for granted in Path of Exile 1 are going away. Like, for example, the unwavering stance keystone is no longer going to give you stun immunity, right? It's going to give you like stun recovery, for example. You are still going to get stunned. So in that sense, if that's the case, I think the chances of there being things like bleed immunity and poison immunity and ignite immunity so readily accessible like they are in Path of Exile 1 is extremely limited. Like, flasks just can't be it, man. That's just... It just doesn't make any sense, I think, having these flasks.
Okay.
Like,
that's the next frontier. Maybe it's the next frontier, man. You never know.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting problem, because it means, like, I do think they're going to have to come up with something interesting for this. And like, so if the only solution that I've heard that makes any sense at all is some kind of like, limiting like them to a very small number, 1 or 2 flasks, and then having like either very powerful crafted mods or the ability to like somehow skill tree your flasks or something, right? Because like, you're gonna need them to do like way more. The less you have.
Dreamcore can't
no, but this is the thing. I'm not saying this is like the way to do it, but like it's the only thing I've heard that is like possible, because you're gonna need your single flask to do way more. I don't think you can have the same number of flasks. But then it becomes, well, what's the point in having a flask if it does everything?
What game besides Path of Exile? Anybody in the chat, or you guys, whatever, has that number of like flask slots, right? And has active abilities, okay? Path of Exile 1, we have like 1 or 2 active abilities right now, right? And 5 flask slots. In PoE 2, if we're pressing, like you both said, all these different abilities, right? They want us to use a lot of different abilities. Then we have WASD, and then we have 5 flask slots. Like, guys, how tenable is this in the long term? Then I'm thinking about it. I think it works in PoE 1, or it did for a long time, because you were using like what, 1 or 2 abilities a lot of the time, constantly, and then your flasks.
They basically became your skills before you automated them, right? Like they were just like your skill hand.
So I actually think that there's a pretty darn good chance that they change this after mass amounts of people test it out. Truly.
I think one of the things that they do have like as an advantage in Path of Exile 2 is that right now, like if you're just looking at the way the flasks work compared to Path of Exile 1, they've got a bit more freedom in terms of actually changing it, because you can make the argument that in Path of Exile 1 they should remove these flasks, right? Just remove them and add that power onto characters all the time. So they've just, because that's what's happening anyway. I mean, everyone knows it. Like these flasks are just active most of the time, and that's just what's going on, right? And then you just have a life flask or whatever. You could make that argument. But then you run into a lot of problems. You've got Pathfinder, you've got Mage Blood, you've got all these things, right? You can't really do it. It's basically not a thing that you can do. Whereas in Path of Exile 2, they got a clean slate. We already kind of know that Flasks are being toned down big time. We did have that discussion a while back where they talked about how Flasks are replacing guard skills, but I mean, we haven't seen any evidence of that at all. All we've seen is an antidote flask. I mean, that's not a guard skill. I'm sorry, that's not even close. So they've definitely got opportunity to change flasks before the early access starts, to change them in a meaningful way. It's just, how do they go about doing it?
Dude, I actually think your suggestion was really cool. Like, have like 1 life, 1 mana, and then things on the tree and ascendancies and unique items which alter those slots potentially, like you said about blood magic and CI. I've just seen someone in the chat, who was it? Shade Spiral, saying like, well, maybe you take a Huntress Ascendancy and that gives you a Tincture slot instead of, a life slot or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then if it's like a Pathfinder, you could get an extra slot, an extra flask slot, and depending on how things like that. So that's definitely an option. But
and so then it limits the whole thing of 5 flasks and it being this whole problem down to like, cool, I have a life and a mana button, right? And that then seems totally normal to me. I could imagine that in a game I could imagine playing that and that not feeling stressful or piano-y. Like, need more mana, press the mana button. Oops, got a rubbish mana flask. Like, I need to upgrade it, It's like, okay, cool.
But then it's like, so if the design space is that they're relying on people using flasks to remove things like poison, is it then that you have things in the game that have, like a life flask removes all damaging ailments? Is that something that you have in the game? Because if that's the case, that is a huge change design-wise for the game, because suddenly you're solving all of these problems with 1 flask, and if that's too powerful, you completely trivialize ailments in the game, right? So
yeah, I don't think you could do that. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah. But like, you could imagine, okay, my build has like 80% freeze or cold like avoidance or something, right? Cold ailment of your avoidance. I don't know how these stats will look, but then it's like, cool, maybe I don't need the freeze mod. I need the poison mod because I'm not speccing into that on the tree. And you can imagine how that can be slightly more manageable, just like we do now, but without the extremes of like, well, I'm immune to this. I avoid everything because I've got, like Storm Shroud or, whatever.
Anyway, the Shadow had a pretty wild idea that is now making me think of Guild Wars 2. What if they turned flasks into skills? I don't think they'd ever do it because flasks are so iconically ARPG, and they're, Diablo 2 blood and all the like. But like in Guild Wars 2, each class has a variety of different heal skills, and they all accomplish different things, and you can use them in different scenarios. That is an interesting design point, but I just think that Omega Cybers also pointed out, then unique flasks would die, right? They wouldn't be a thing.
Also, as Chaos and Coffee points out, it's basically the same. Got another. It's the same thing, right? You have a button still. It's just it's now a skill that's tied. I know what you're saying, by the way, with a skill, because you can have then different skills like tied to each ascendancy, maybe even each class, things like that.
That's a cool idea. Cool thought.
Yeah, but I think it like you're saying, it's the same thing where it's 1 button. It's just replacing a different button. But also, there's something really cool about flasks, I think, that they unify access to across all class types, and I think that can't be understated either. That being able to craft a flask as an item to fit what your build needs. Whereas if, say, I picked a ranger and I got nature's leafy healing, right, like as a skill, but then I'm like, oh, actually, I'm building into like a chaos ranger because the thing that we love about PoE is like, well, that doesn't affect me in the right way. So I think like having the universality of flasks is actually a strength of the system.
Right. Good points. Good points. All right. I know I opened the flask bottle. We're going to stuff it back in the bottle.
Nice.
I could have used a flask analogy there, but I didn't. Dang. Campaign changes was the other thing since the last time we talked that have been talked about a lot. Mostly about, the secrets in the campaigns now, the determinism that's going to happen, all the rebalancing that have gone with bosses, the fact that, I guess there is another gem change, guys. We should talk about it very briefly. the fact that they had to rebalance every boss in the campaign because we can now support our default attack with support gems. I totally skipped over that. That's a big change too. I saw intense discussion about this. People hating it, people loving it, people thinking grinding your games is off their rocket, like all this different stuff. Opinions on the two experts sitting in this podcast.
Oh my god, Dream looks like he needs a minute. Dream needs a minute.
You want me to stall for you both? I'll stall.
No.
Oh, you got it?
So
go for it.
Yeah, just for me, my opinion isn't too strong on this. I saw it and I thought, oh, okay, cool. Like, as long as if they're not necessary or overpowered and stuff like that, the way I looked at it was just kind of like, well, here's a very simple skill that isn't a builder. It isn't like a, do you know what I mean? Like this whole like builder spender mentality. I think people are concerned about that. And the way I look at that is like, I don't necessarily think this will be the case, because maybe you use this skill and it becomes something that's like useful for you. But I think in most cases, people are just not going to use these. I almost think these are there as like a lowering the floor of entry thing that you'd sort of mentioned earlier, where it's like, I think these are just there so that people are like, do I have a default attack that does something? Does that make sense? Like, I don't see these being like top end build use cases. Maybe in rare scenarios, which could be interesting, right? Maybe you get a unique that makes your dagger attack do extra things, or I don't know, whatever, right? Like, but I think this will be a niche thing. Most players are going to be using advanced skill combinations that do not involve this stuff.
Yeah, what's with the complaints? This is the simple stuff that people have been asking for. If you want something like a Righteous Fire, guys, just use the default attack, okay? Just do that. You know, it's not going to be optimal, but it will be viable, okay? It's something that, like, my dad, okay? My dad, he loved Diablo 4. He was like, I can't play PoE 1. Loved Diablo 4, though. He was like a spin-to-win barbarian, brain dead, completely brain dead. And as I talked about Path of Exile 2 skill system, he was like, that's a bit too much. I'm pushing 65. I don't know if I can do that, you know? I need something simple. This is that, you know? You just have your bonk. You just go around, bonk stuff, maybe press one other extra ability every few packs or something. You're good. Nice, simple, extra option. I think Dreamcore completely disagrees with me. Let's go.
So first of all, we already talked about a hotkey pressure. You're just adding another hotkey. So that's one point that I think is just complete waste of time. So I didn't really have much of an opinion on the whole supporting auto attack thing after they announced it, because I thought it doesn't really matter, because I think most people are just going to be, like Sylver said, right? Most people are just going to be using like combos, and if like if there's like an attack ready to be used, it's probably going to be stronger than an auto attack. I had that opinion until I went into Paustron's stream one day, and Paustron brought up a really good point. He said, if you're using a ranger auto attack, right, and you've got a bow, that's fine. Like, you can, maybe you've got like extra projectiles, you basically turn it into a split arrow or whatever, okay? But melee auto attack is absolute garbage. Like, it is complete and utter garbage. Like, you have to get right up to someone to even hit them. Super close to them. Like, can you imagine a melee auto attack on a slam build that stands like 3 meters away from enemies to hit them, and now you have to like walk right up to them close range to like deal a minuscule damage to them? I mean, what is the use case of that? I don't really see it ever being used. So I don't know. I don't see the auto attack thing being something that I really do hope they don't lean into it too much either, because you don't want to be forcing this thing on people that like it's just completely meaningless. You know, it's just like,
I think it's literally, Omega Cybers just said it. It's like Heavy Strike. It is the...
he even described... I think someone described it as Heavy Strike. I seem to remember someone even... Yeah,
he's like...
So... Go on, sorry, go on.
No, go.
No, you go, Trey. No.
There you go. You go for it.
Okay, all I was going to say is, it's because I understand what you're saying, Dream, where if you look at, if you've got Armor Breaker, like, as a single target attack, and you've got like, you know, this like two-handed mace ability that's just hitting them, why would you not take the skill that has like the additional effect, right? That breaks armor or that does something else, or like, you know, whatever. But I think we're worried here for no reason, because they are not stupid. They know exactly what they're doing, and they will be playing the game and going, "Oh, everyone's using Mace Strike at end game." Like, you know, I think this wasn't as intended. So I do think this is kind of just like hey, here's a default attack. We didn't know what to do with default attack, so we just made it supportable. Anyway, over to you, Troy.
No, I agree.
But that's what I'm saying. But why? Like, why? So. Why default attack? Like, why is there not some attacks that they've designed for each attack class or each spell class that is like a default attack, but it's more interesting and it can be used in those situations, you know?
That's
like
what we're talking about. That's what they have done.
No, but it's not. But it's not though. It's not. So, like, for example, let me give you an example, right? Let's say that there's a skill like Sunder in Path of Exile 2 that doesn't do the whole like explosion thing when it hits an enemy, right? It doesn't create shockwaves, so it's like a basic attack. If I'm using a slam skill, as I've already said, I'm standing very far away from the enemy. That's the whole point of using slam skills in melee, is that you're not actually melee. You know, you're basically playing a ranged ability because you have these giant slams. In that case, for those builds, I'm never using auto attack because I am never in range of the enemy to use auto attack. I would have to physically move my character in range to start punching them, you know, with this melee, like small range melee attack.
But then you just don't put it on your hotbar, mate.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So what? So why
but
not?
There is a build. But there is because you're talking about a Sunder build, right? But maybe I've got a build where I'm up close and I'm up close and I'm using these different things, and then I'm like, cool, I do want to add this into my thing, and I just get it for free, just like you get Chaos
but it
Bolt.
could be. But for example, it could be Heavy Strike, right? For those builds that are actually melee, and then it could be a version of Sunder for slam builds. What I'm saying is you can make these skills that don't have a cooldown, that are designed for each archetype specifically.
Maybe that's what they'll become. Maybe they will add additional interesting effects to them or something. Who knows? But then that kind of gets into the dodgy space of like, well, this is then becomes a mandatory skill kind of vibe. Like if you make them.
But that's how I feel like they're already trying to push that narrative, because it's like. So what I'm saying is, right, why does auto attack exist and is supportable if it doesn't need to be? Right now in Path of Exile 1, you can't support auto attack. Nobody ever even considers it. It's not needed. Nobody cares about it, right? Right. If you could support auto attack in Path of Exile 1, do you think people would use it?
But this is Path of Exile 1 we're talking about, man.
Yeah, but what I'm
saying
is
screen explode.
Yeah, okay, it's screen explode, but
I literally think...
What is the point of it?
I think the point of it is literally for... I'm going back to my dad argument. It's people who are coming in from MMOs and other games who are literally, even though the skill gem system and all this stuff it's tutorialized in this game, I think it's kind of going to go over their heads. And it's just like a backup measure for people to continue pushing forward. Like, if, you know, you get an uncut gem and it's like, hey, look, there's Sunder right here. You should really use Sunder. And they're like, you know, I have a default attack. I just want to keep using my default attack. And the game like can't force you into using Sunder. So, I mean, maybe it could gate you. But what I'm saying is, like, I don't think they want people to bounce from the game if they don't understand the skill gem system. And I think there's going to be so many people who do not understand the skill gem system, even though it's being laid out, that this is going to help them progress far enough to actually buy into the skill gems. That's what I think.
Yeah,
I don't think people are going to...
I think it would be more interesting if they made auto attack be something that you can select. There's like a selection of auto attack skill gems, right? Which are only made for auto attack. So for example, for a ranger, you could have split arrow could be one of the auto attacks, right? And for a melee character, it could be heavy strike if you're playing a strike skill. Maybe it's Sunder if you're playing a slam skill, and you can select an auto attack. Then it would make sense if it was supportable, I think, because now I can actually choose a skill which makes sense with my archetype. It's actually a skill which I want to use.
Maybe it's like that. Okay, it's probably not like that.
If it's like that, I can see it. And
because
by the way, people bring up a good point in the chat. They're talking about how auto attacks are there to solve mana issues in the early game, which does kind of make sense. But I also think that they're kind of creating a problem which doesn't need to exist in that case, right? With the whole mana problem, like mana sustain problems, things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for the raid, Balor, by the way. Thank you for all the new viewers. We're talking about Path of Exile 2. We're in an unhinged default attack discussion between, it seems like it's Sylver and I versus Dreamcore right now. We're trying to convince them that it's okay. Dream, what I think might be happening, because now it's probably 99% chance that this isn't the case, but since default attacks are granted by weapons, maybe they differ by base type. We haven't seen many base types. I wonder if that's probably not going on. It's probably just you shoot an arrow with a bow. But what if there's a little bit more sophisticated auto attacks going on from different base types that could drop early game? That's a possibility. It's probably not happening, but would that kind of be a good idea?
Well, yeah, that's basically what I said in a way, right? Because you got like, if you have like a big mace, two-handed mace, it's going to be like that kind of, that would make sense. But I just think it's a bit weird. The supported auto attack, I just don't really see the need for it. I feel like by adding that and talking about it like that, they're kind of saying, they're basically making a problem and solving it at the same time. It's just like, where you could just not have the issue of, like, you know, if mana is going to be a problem for melee builds early on in the game, like, just make it so that people can solve mana problems, you know?
Reduce the mana cost of melee, of those skills, I think you've got such a legitimate concern that you could be making a problem out of nothing, like, but then I also do appreciate the idea, like what you, I think, put really well, Triumph. This kind of just is like a backstop, and some people in the chat were saying it's just a backstop as you're like maybe going through Act 1 or 2. You've got another skill that you can support if you've got a few gems laying around or something. Like, I can see both sides of that. I think when I guess we don't know, right? And it might change dramatically in EA. So I think, like, you've both got solid points. The thing that someone brought up in the chat, which I thought was interesting, is I wonder if, kind of off of the back of what you guys were just saying about different weapon types having different attacks, I wonder if if we're going to see a lot more unique items offering unique versions of these, like, attacks and things. You know, you imagine, like, you know, just, I don't know, like some kind, you know, a sword which gives you like a special kind of like infernal version of this, you know, attack or something like that. That would be, because obviously we have uniques that give us skills in the game in PoE 1. But they kind, like you said earlier, Troy, with the animation system and stuff, they're kind of always a little bit janky, and they don't put many of them in the game. It could be really cool opening up things like that.
Like Doriani's Fist, like a legit item where you're actually building around the skill on the item itself. What's the one from Ultimatum that gives you that blood explosion skill? I know that's one that people have built. What is it called?
It's not Yamax.
It's not that crazy pact. Name either.
Something Pact.
Blood of the Pact, Relic of the Pact. Relic of the Pact.
Nice.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's going to be a far more common occurrence in Path of Exile too. That'll be pretty freaking cool.
Do you know what would be really, really cool about this as well, I think, is that it won't define your build entirely. So, like, if you want to do a Doriani's build now, right, like your whole thing is like, cool, I'm building around this, right? Whereas because we have like those like multiple skills that we're going to be using, you can actually get scenarios now where you're like comboing multiple skills from multiple unique items maybe, or you're like just weaving this one thing that you get off of your, you know, second-hand dagger, you know, into your like offhand dagger unique in your second weapon slot that situationally is like super good, right? Because it immediately uses all bleed, like depletes all bleed on a target or something crazy. So yeah, I can like this. That I think that design space is going to be blown wide open. We're going to see so much interesting stuff from that potentially over the years.
They've also got a better basis to actually do those things in the first place now, because in Path of Exile 1 they kind of design an item with the amount of sockets in mind, right, for how many supports it can have. In Path of Exile 2, obviously, it'll be supportable like normally, so they'll just be balancing it like a normal skill, but they won't have the problem of like retroactively having to balance something because something new gets added to the game. Like, you know, the Squire gets added in, and suddenly all of those like one-handed weapons that offer a skill are suddenly just broken. Right, they've just been broken by the addition of that skill, so they have to like go back and, you know, fix them. So
this actually brings up something I'm so glad this has come back to my mind, because I was really curious if you guys have heard anything about this. There's some things in the game that might exist. I think because I've been thinking about ascendancies, I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Of like giving the players skills from an ascendancy. And we saw this in 2019 at ExileCon, where they were like, cool, you get this ability. And Mark was saying how, or maybe it was Rory, was saying how like bone armor, right? Like you get bone armor but it has to be at a certain level. And they were saying what they want to do is dynamically scale it to your level, right? Which makes perfect sense. So say on an ascendancy, you got bone armor, it would be per level, it would increase with effectiveness. That all makes sense. The thing that I keep thinking though is if these go into your skill UI and you can add support gems to them, and the same with unique items, as we're talking about it, you get a skill from a unique item. How do you think they're going to deal with like how you get more support gem sockets on these things? Will it be like character level based, or say on a unique item, would it be something like you get a roll range of number of support sockets available on that skill? So like, cool, I've got a Viper Strike dagger, let's just call it, right? Like and I rolled a 6 socket or a 5 support Viper Strike dagger, and that becomes like the range. This is such a niche thing, but I thought,
I
thought about this.
I think they actually talked about that in the 2019 ExileCon. They talked about how in Path of Exile 1 they were completely limited with having skills come from ascendancies, because you just get a leveled skill. It's always the same level. Like, it doesn't matter if you get it at the first lab or the last lab, it will be the same power level, right? And I think they actually talked about that, saying that they could make it so that it's based on two different avenues: either one, character level, or two, ascendancy progression. So like, you know, if you unlock it for your first ascendancy point, it gives you a level 5 version of the skill, and then when you get your second ascendancy point, it levels up to level 10, and then the third is level 15. Or if you unlock it on your final point and you've already got 3 points, it's level 20, like, because it's tied to your ascendancy progression. Or it's just tied to character level, which also works.
So both of those I think make sense with ascendancy stuff, right? Like if you're getting skills from ascendancies. But with items, I think that would feel really weird, potentially. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. It could just work where it's based on character level. But if I got an item that was like... I think it might feel strange if I got an item that weirdly gained more sockets as I level my character. Whereas it would make much more... Because of the way we think of items, I think in PoE or ARPGs generally, it's like, oh, I dropped this version of this item with these rolls, and it's fixed in that way. So I feel like the character level thing doesn't necessarily work the same with unique item skills.
Well, in a way, unique items are already gated by their level requirement, right? So it's like if you've got a level 60 mace that gives you a skill, you can pretty much give the person the same skill that they'd have at level 90, because at that point you're already kind of approaching the end game. If it's a level 30 item, you give them an item which, you know, is appropriately powered level for that level, I would say.
Yeah. But then that just create redundancy. Like long term, you won't be able to use that item. But then they could balance it around the number of sockets that it has available, I guess. So
I guess it does depend on the design of the item, because like there's a lot of items in Path of Exile that are clearly designed as a leveling item, and once they're used for leveling, they're then just thrown out because they're not very good anymore. So it depends if they kind of want it to be something that you build around. Obviously, people do build around items sometimes that are like complete garbage, and they suddenly find a good use for them, and that will still be a thing in Path of Exile 2. But I think it does. It's really based on how they end up designing the skill.
Exciting though. No, it's a good point. It depends. Yeah,
super exciting. Now, guys, we've been talking for a long time. I think we're gonna save the campaign discussions for another time, and we talked about them last time. But I've been talking about hot takes about Path of Exile 2 the past few days, reading, reactions from the community and just getting people's opinions on the game since we're so close to launch. So I thought I could pose a few of the hot take kind of questions or opinions to either of you, and then we could close it out getting your 2 hottest takes about Path of Exile 2. We can get really spicy, we can get people pissed at us, and we'll just end the podcast, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so, number 1. Path of Exile 2 boss design is awful. People think that the bosses will take too long to fight, and that they will become slogs almost immediately. Thoughts on this opinion?
Sylver, you go first.
Okay. I'm really trying to really round this out and think from all perspectives on this one. So, but my gut reaction is obviously what type of game are you playing? I guess bosses basically didn't exist, so we're just gaining bosses in PoE2, kind of, except for endgame bosses. But then my thing is, I think it's important. I'm trying to steelman that argument, I guess. I think it is important that we have different avenues of endgame which lean more towards bossing or less towards bossing. So perhaps maps, a third of the map is bossing, they're saying, potentially. Maybe if there's something on the Atlas which allowed you to I don't know, not have bosses in maps or something, as a really wild example, and get more monster packs. Or alternatively, there's certain endgame systems which are deliberately focused on bossing. I've got this idea, some people have been talking about this in the community for a long time. What if there was some kind of arena system where you kind of went through almost like Tota, and you had rounds and you were faced up against different bosses, and it was this boss gauntlet thing for very boss specific players? That could be cool. But then alternatively, you could do Delve and avoid every single boss node and just kind of play Delve or something. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. So it's a ridiculous take at first glance, but also I think it's important we have variation.
Very kind, Sylver.
I actually think there is a little bit of merit in what's being said here, because the one thing that, personally, I don't really have that opinion, but what I do think is that if the bosses are that much in depth, and we're talking about every boss in terms of you're doing a map, there's the boss. You're like Sylver said, it's meant to be a third of the map. You put another map in. You know how people play right now. They load up 20 maps. They've got them all crafted. They're just throwing them in the Atlas one after the other and mapping. If it is the case that every boss is mechanically like an Uber boss, and you need your full focus on it, okay, that might be a bit of a problem for someone just wanting to come home after work one day and blast maps, right? Because they don't want to be they don't want to be spending all of their brain power. They just worked all day. They just want to blast some monsters, right? They just want to kill monsters. So there is, I definitely do see that perspective, but I think this actually all comes down to a balancing perspective from GGG. They need to get the balance right on these, because if it's the case that bosses are too much in depth, people will just find a way to avoid them. Like Sylver said, they'll spec into things on the Atlas tree to make the map generally rewarding, juice up the monsters, and they will run maps that have good layouts for killing monsters, and they just ignore the boss. That's what's going to happen if they don't get the balance right. So yeah, that's basically what I've got to say about that.
But I think that's a really good point. I think they should almost lean into that, which is allow the player to really make that decision, instead of it being this isn't worth my time efficiency wise. What if it was cool, I'm going to deliberately avoid doing this and take that kind of the benefit that I would be getting from the bosses and place it elsewhere, and vice versa, right? Give the certain players options that are I just love fighting bosses. So one node, for example, that I think could be a good idea would you randomize the boss that appears in the end arena of each map. Because then, those players are getting constantly different boss encounters. It's not, even though,
that's a hot
stuff
take.
That. Yeah, that's wild, right? It's wild,
That's
but
wild.
It's something that they could do.
My very measured take on this is that people may be a bit short-sighted here. I think that when we first play this game, the bosses are going to be ridiculously engaging, challenging, and they will maybe be a slog for some of us. The first time I played PoE, I spent 2 hours on an Act 1 boss. That's crazy. the third or fourth time I play, or on my subsequent character or whatever, guys, I think it's going to be so easy. I've been like that basically like on Maven, on Shaper, on all the act bosses. The first time I fought Kitava, I think I grave rushed him over 150 times, like to kill him the first time. I think that unfortunately some people are going to bounce because the bosses will be difficult, but for those people that really like stick it and like want to try the game and give it a fair shot, it's going to become way easier your second playthrough, whether or not you have twinked gear or not. That's what I think, because if you don't like a game with bosses, I don't think you're going to like Path of Exile 2, given the way that they've gone in on the boss design, right? They're like, yeah, that's one of the 100%. Things.
100%. It's not 100
plus bosses, sure. Right? It's like 100 plus bosses. All of them are unique. Like they're not, and it's not just, okay, well, this boss has a wide auto attack and this boss slams down vertically in front of him with an auto attack, and oh my god, unique bosses. No, like all of them actually have engaging mechanics that you have to pay attention to. So it's going to be a sharp like wake up call for some people who played Path of Exile 1. And you know, we have what? Hillock, and then we have the fire cannibal, and then we have the freeze guy. I can't believe Railrake, what's his name? Hailrake? Yeah.
Hailrake.
Like all these bosses, very one-dimensional, very easy. You almost blow past them. And then, you know, the Devourer is the second boss in Path of Exile 2.
Hey,
that was a choice.
Don't talk bad about Hailrake, okay? I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, Hailrake's got, you know, predictive targeting systems now, okay? You know, he like sort of tries to trick you a bit.
Hailrake's going to get you in the gauntlet, dude. Next
week, dude. You think Hailrake's going to get me? I'm going to die to Hillock. Is 1 through 5? No, 6 through 10 is chaos. I think was 1 through 5 chaos in the first gauntlet? Or no? Did they not add it? Or was that, I don't know.
In the older gauntlets, it used to be Fizz's extra elemental, and every pack hitting you would like freeze you and ignite you. It was just awful. It was absolutely awful.
Yeah, it's rough. Okay, thank you for your measured takes. Here's another, and I'm giving you not the craziest ones, right? Because I want to give them a fair shot. Here's the next one. Path of Exile 2 on early access release is going to have the content equivalent of a 0.3 or 0.7 development cycle of like Path of Exile 1 or Last Epoch. And as soon as it launches, like a weekend, Grinding Gear Games is going to realize that they've made a mistake in releasing early access this soon. Thoughts?
Hey, let me just understand what you're saying. What? So you're saying that they won't release enough content in the EA. Is what you're saying.
It's going to be like a skeleton. It's going to be like a 0.3 version of a game instead of like what they're pitching as like, oh, it's a full game release. There's going to be a lot of content, all the acts, you know, skeleton of the end game, all these skills. It's actually going to be like a skeleton, and we're going to basically blow through it and be like, whoa, what the heck is this?
Okay, so I think this comes down to expectations, right? And this is so, I think this is just human psychology thing coming in, which is, for example, I'm looking at November 15th as like, if I've got a full campaign, I'm happy. Because I think there's just going to be so much, game time to like experience this, playing all the different classes, going through the campaign over and over, and kind of like experiencing different play styles and all this stuff, and then doing co-op. And I think there's going to be just enough in the campaign. So for me, my expectations, I think, are hopefully sensibly like really low. And then I think like the end game, the map system, which they've said is definitely going to be in there, like we haven't heard anything about it. So I'm really trying not to get too excited, because my mind like will just start going, well, what is maps but like twice as good? You know, like, you know, what they must have been cooking something, you know, for ages. So I'm almost like just trying to ignore Endgame, to be honest. So like, I think I sit on that kind of like expectations very low. So it will be hard for me to feel that they don't have enough content in the game. Like the fact that we're getting like all these act bosses and all these different bosses and unique events in maps, in the campaign areas. Like, I'm kind of happy, to be honest, like with that. So
I think it's just a non-problem, in my opinion. It's just not. I don't really see that as a concern at all. I don't know.
Yeah,
I agree. Like, I agree, guys. Like, there's going to be so much. I mean, we got to remember, like, the comparison that this hot take person was making was PoE 0.3 to 0.7. The Val Oversoul didn't exist during those patches.
Yeah, this is what I mean. The campaign was nowhere near complete.
So I'm kind of confused because it actually did get like a lot of traction too. It's like, oh, are people really believing this? No, I think we're going to be set. It's a non-concern. We're going to have all these different classes to experiment with, 100+ bosses to explore, all these monsters to fight, all these unique items that, like, we've only seen 7 unique items from PoE2, I think. I mean, even if there's only 50, which I doubt there's going to be more, there's going to be a bunch of experimentation. It's going to be fun. It's going to be like, I think a Path of Exile 1 players, as long as they're okay with the change up in like engagement, it's going to be just amazing. People are going to love it. It's going to be paradise, especially for that first like few weeks, first month.
Yeah. The discovery period is going to be so fun, you know, like us all just talking and like sharing different, you know, oh, have you seen that? No way. This, and the Reddit's going to be insane. There's going to be like, no way, I found this boss. And, you know,
Beautiful. Okay. Those were the 2 I wanted to talk about. I thought those were fair. Okay. So now Sylver, Dreamcore, hot takes, your hottest Path of Exile 2 hot take. Let's piss off people before we log off for the day. What do you think? Is something that you have an opinion on? It might be different from the community. It just might be a really strong opinion that you have about the game. Lay it on us.
Yeah, do you know what? I don't have. Okay. This, if I was gonna say like my biggest concern, controversial take, is that what you're looking for? Like my biggest. Okay. Because I'm like so weirdly positive about this game that I'm a bit like you. Like I struggle to try and find criticisms or concerns. My biggest concern will be that they bring back too much old League content too quickly, and it is not developed or evolved enough. So in the kind of backing off of the last hot take that you mentioned, was like that maybe in the concern that there's not going to be enough content in the game, they smash in a load of old stuff, all the old leagues, without like much additional work or evolution. And then it feels like the game gets heavy and bloated and a little bit like, you could have maybe done this better. That's my probably. I don't think that will happen, but I think it's my biggest concern. That's my hot take.
Very sensible. Yeah, like almost like a snap reaction to maybe some people saying, "Oh my gosh, there's like nothing here," and they don't want that, and they start loading stuff in really, really, really quickly. Right. So
yeah, like we've seen Ritual, Ritual in the recent gameplay stuff. Like you said, rightly so. We don't know if that's a mechanic or just a campaign feature. Like they could have just decked it and then it comes back later. But my personal opinion is Ritual's a really fun like roll the dice simulator, one-armed bandit thing. But I think it's like pretty weak as like a big league mechanic that's exciting in of its own right. If that makes sense. Like I don't think there's much depth there. There's no lore. There is lore to it, but like the lore's kind of limited, and I don't think it's very tied in very well. All this stuff. So that's an example where I think like, maybe you could do more with that, and maybe if you just waited like 6 months and brought back a league every 3 or 6 months, it would be better.
I expect them to be quite conservative with adding the leagues. I think they're going to really think about them and be conservative with them. I think it's going to take them a long time to add them in. Like, I think they're going to be coming in like way after they've like added mapping in, right? Like they're probably going to have a couple of things there ready to go, like a couple that they're really happy with having in. But I think when it comes to adding them in, they're going to be very, very sure of something before they actually add it, because they kind of know from past experiences, Harvest in Ritual League, everyone remembers. That adding something into the game and not really being 100% sure about how it's going to go or like how it's going to be received is not a good idea. And they also already have a lot of information to pull from with leagues. Like they know which leagues are just completely loved by the player base. They know which ones are a bit divisive. So they can they can take that information and work with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure, they will.
All right.
So I've only got one take. I don't know. I've really got two. I don't think it's really a hot take. Just the same thing I've always had. I think there's just too many hotkeys.
Yeah.
Too many hotkeys. That's Like we already talked about Flasks earlier. There's WASD. That's an extra 4. I just think there's too many hotkeys, and that's it. That's my take.
I think that's a fine take.
If I feel like I have to play with a controller, maybe I'll like dabble in controller. I have heard people say a lot of good things about controller on Path of Exile 2. So
look at that. I always edit it out in my videos. Every time I'm like, hey guys, look, this controller right here. I always edit it out because I'm an idiot. There it was.
Every chance he gets to flex his controller.
Yeah, I know. He's flaunting it again, dude.
Getting it out.
I'm sorry. So you're open to trying controller out though, Dreamcore?
Oh yeah. I definitely give it a try. If it's something that's like considerably better, because you got to understand that they've actually designed the game for use with controller from the beginning this time, rather than, I don't know how you would describe it. They've like basically mashed it in there for like the Path of Exile 1 client, right?
Yeah.
They just got it working, and they have, from what I've heard, they've actually made a lot of improvements to the Path of Exile 1 console client.
PS5, yeah. And I've heard the new PS5 client runs really well too.
It's supposed to be really good, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but obviously with Path of Exile 2, they actually designed that from the beginning for use with controllers. Which makes me think that it's probably going to be quite a good experience playing on controller. But I also, maybe the hotkeys problem is a non-factor. Like, I have to try it first. It's just like, it's just something that I think that might be a problem, because we already have we're definitely going to have more skills. We already know that we're expected to use more skills for combos. Then you've got WASD. Then you've got flasks that are probably not going to be automated. It's a lot of skills.
You never want a situation, I think, like D4, where you're like, oh, I wish I could just. So many times when I tried that game out, I was like, I just wish I could have this extra skill on my bar. But the way they balanced skills was like it was too much power to have access to that other skill. Whereas we know that what they're trying to do with PoE is like, it's not about cooldowns, because it's not cooldown balanced. You don't have that problem, so you can actually have as many skills available to you as possible. So yeah, I agree with you. I hope it's not a scenario where you're like, oh, I wish I could just have this like single target ability, but oops, I've run out of buttons. Like, yeah, I think it's legit.
Yeah. Okay, I think those were both great takes, you guys. Mine, I'll share mine here. You guys remember Necropolis League? That was a league, right?
Oh,
you guys remember that league?
That was a league.
Yeah.
Don't go there, bro.
Do you remember how many hot fixes had to occur on that league and how pissed off people got about not being able to play with the most broken stuff and all that, right? Yeah. I think with PoE 2, it is going to be magnified tenfold, because 1, there's going to be a higher player base. 2, it's going to be in early access, and they will be doing like weekly patches, I bet. Hot fixing all the crazy broken stuff that the hundreds of thousands of players are going to abuse. And the community is going to be on fire. I don't think people will understand that it's an early access title. There's so many different moving pieces in PoE 2 with like the skill gems and the bosses and the new uniques, and it has not been tested widespread. I think it is going to be an absolute dumpster fire, because people are going to be like, I didn't get to abuse this thing so I could two-shot the act boss, or oh man, there's going to be some sort of, loot exploit along the way. I think it's going to be it's going to be a mess, because people are going to expect perhaps that there won't be a ton of changes, because like Path of Exile historically, they don't do that a lot. Like, except back during open beta, closed beta, when they had a lot of patches consistently and they were changing stuff up.
This is different. People have got to go into this with a different perspective. Like, if you're going into a league and you're starting from scratch, right, every league, you don't really expect to, that's why people were angry, is that people who got to maps first and were able to kind of abuse this thing in Necropolis, there was actually quite a lot of them. Like, there was lots 100%. Of scarab things, and there was, the lantern mechanic and stuff like that. All of it was like a bit exploity and stuff, and verged on being, unhealthy for the game. Whereas people in Path of Exile 2, they have to go into it with the perspective of, this is early access. There's going to be patches all the time. Things are going to be fixed all the time. I'm going to... One day, maybe I'm one-shotting a boss because these mechanics are not working properly. The next day, I'm not one-shotting anymore because it's been fixed. Right?
They were resetting.
If people get angry about that,
yeah,
I'm sorry, you're just wrong. Like, just don't have that perspective.
That is the state of like gaming. It's gonna, and I feel like it's gonna be messy, especially because like compared to other communities that I've been in, Path of Exile community is very, very vocal. So you could log in, very passionate. You could log in to your character one day, and your passive skill tree will just be completely reset. You got to be ready for that. People will not be ready, and it's going to just be like, I can see the anger now. I can see it.
So I think it's GGG's responsibility, obviously, to like really communicate that. But then I also think it's like probably like our jobs. It's weird saying that. Still feel pretty new to this, but like it's like content creators' jobs as well to make sure that like I think they're also echoing that message.
Like temper expectations a bit.
I think that could really help. Like that is like an ability that the creator community in PoE, which is really strong and has lots of voices. I think if everyone's just like, hey, we're rats in a maze, remember you're a rat in a maze right now, you know, it's like this is early access, like this is made to be broken, go break the game, Exile, you know, it's like that kind of mentality, as opposed to, hey, like here's this like 3-month investment for you to build the coolest character. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. You're going to get bricked, mate. Like, you know, every build you try make is going to get broken by some change.
Like, people are going to complain, but at the end of the day, I think it's a lot different. Like, there will be, like you said, there will be outrage, but I think most reasonable people will not be like piling on that outrage and like, you know, they won't be like making it worse. They'll be like, you know, just tone it down a bit.
Like not calm it, but just quell the flames.
Well, yeah, but it's just like, or just don't interact with it at all, right? I mean, the Reddit is obviously going to be like going crazy. There's going to be half of the Reddit is going to be people like, oh wow, look at this new unique item that I found. How cool is this? The other half is like, what's happened to my character? Like, I'm dying. Like, what's going on? You know, like, and I guess some people will be interacting with like, and they'll just be like, okay, there's another one of those threads. I'm not even clicking on it. I'm not interested. You know, it's just, but yeah, you've just got to have the right perspective going into it. It's early access. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be problems. They will be fixing things probably very regularly. I expect fixes like, you know, every day or two, something like that. Maybe even multiple a day, like hot fixes. So
100%. Like it's going to be a new testing ground. It's going to be huge. So it's exciting. It's super exciting. And we are, I think, what's the countdown? I'm doing a daily countdown on Twitter. What is it? We're at 55 days today, guys. 55 days. And any moment now, we're going to learn how we actually access it. I'm sure closer to November, we're going to learn about the end game systems, they said. Ascendancies still, though, you know, I think they're going to be hidden, you know, obscured until the very end. But when that stuff is revealed, you know that we're going to get back on this podcast and have another episode. But I think that's it for today. I want outros for both of you. Go ahead, shout out to all the people in the live chat, people who are watching the VOD, where they can find either of you. Sylver, we'll start off with you.
Okay, hey guys. Well, thanks, Try, for having me. Obviously, as always, I absolutely love doing this. It's been far too long. So yeah, my name's Sylver. You can find me on YouTube under Sylver XYZ, and the same on Twitch. I've been streaming on Twitch. My big project at the minute is my channel's kind of all around, I guess, design and art stuff, and I have been doing a Project 36, which is trying to design 36 Ascendancy classes before early access comes out on November 15th. So we are 13 of the way through, so quite a lot to do, but yeah, having an absolute blast. So I really, if you're into that kind of thing, design and just discussing ideas and that, join me on the channel, join me on Twitch, and yeah, I'd really appreciate your input. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
It's stellar stuff over there, you guys. And yeah, you're 1/3 of the way there. You can do it. I believe.
We can do it, guys. Together.
100%. All right, Dreamcore. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm Dreamcore on YouTube, Dreamcore_GG. I do mostly mechanics for Path of Exile, and I've just started a new series doing the differences from mechanics from Path of Exile 1 to Path of Exile 2, because there's quite a few differences. So, yeah, that's where to find me.
Yeah, wonderful stuff over there. He's a mechanical mastermind, defensive mastermind, and if you're going to be like a lot of us probably playing PoE 1 and PoE 2, he has such a good library explaining all those wild Path of Exile 1 mechanics that are probably going to be long-standing for a very, very long time. Wonderful evergreen content, Dreamcore. So
one thing I forgot, Try, is this is a perfect forum to announce. Obviously, we are going to be doing a three-way ascendancy battle between me, Dream, and Try. So we have decided that we're going to be taking on the Templar and doing a Templar ascendancy each. So I know that everyone's kind of very thirsty to find out what the Templar is going to be. We are as well, so we're going to have good fun doing that. So that will be coming out at some point in the near future.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun. I can't wait to get smashed by both Dreamcore and Sylver. I'll do my best. I will do my best with the design.
I think Sylver's got us both beat, dude. I can't compete with this.
It's gonna be. Are you gonna do like art Dream, or are you gonna do like a janky passive tree?
I don't know. I've got some good ideas, but I'm struggling a little bit at the moment. So we'll see. We'll see what I come up with.
Okay, that will be absolutely fantastic when we get to it, and that will be on Sylver's channel, right, Sylver?
Yeah, that's perfect. Right. Yeah, we might even stream it live and then do the VOD. So we'll see.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be fantastic, everyone. Thanks to all of you in the live chat for tuning in, and thanks everybody on YouTube for watching the VOD. There will be another episode once we get some more Path of Exile 2 news, but until then, stay sane, Exiles. We'll see you later.